Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справді справи заводить, там пивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар. Байрактар. Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.
Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and welcome back to day 703 of the news of the war in Ukraine. We have amazing news to cover tonight as the Ukrainians went up against a massive tank assault by the Russian forces today in the city of Avdiivka, and not only did they go up against it, they were able to successfully repel the assault and lead to some pretty high losses that were confirmed on film. It has been an absolutely amazing day for the Ukrainian defenders in the city of Avdiivka, and if y'all think it was a really good day even before we get into it, make sure to put an LSA in the chat and show that y'all believe in the Ukrainian armed forces. And I'll be getting into why that's a little bit important a little bit later on the stream, but for now, just make sure to put an LSA in the chat if you're behind Ukraine. But moving on into our major news of the night, inside of the city of Avdiivka, there have been major battles going on in the area of Krasnoyarivka and Stepove as Russian forces attempted to break through today with tank and armored personnel columns making their way towards the Ukrainian defenses on the other side of the railroad berm in Berdichi and Stepove. The assault was incredibly large, and not only that, we saw that many Russian vehicles ended up getting lost in this assault and ended up being destroyed by Ukrainian forces. The first one that we got to see was a tank-on-tank duel of a sorts, where a Ukrainian tank was able to destroy a Russian MBT at near point-blank range near the railroad berm at Avdiivka. I'll be showing y'all this clip. This is actually, oddly enough, happened a little bit farther north than we're usually, kind of accustomed to, but I'll show you the clip right here of the tank getting destroyed. Here we can see the railroad berm just to the north of Avdiivka, and we can see the Russian tank get smacked right there by the Ukrainian APFSDS shell and blown up. You can see the smoke coming off of the burnt powder from the shell that was fired from this Ukrainian T-64 as it's now pulling back off the line after knocking the Russian tank out completely. We can now see the Ukrainian T-64 moving off, and also a very rare instance of an interesting kind of a technology being used on this T-64. This is not a bad oil filter in the back of this T-64. That is actually a smoke screen that can be deployed from the engine bay, a really neat feature, and we can see it laying out that smoke screen as it now retreats off the field, facing, actually the turret facing backwards as it's driving away. And we can see it making its way back down the railway berm and away from the Russian tank. And Kevin J, you got that Morse code dead on the nail. Congratulations on that. And congratulations to all of our Morse code deciphers, because I have not been able to get to y'all a lot recently since the loss of the co-host. But really quickly, let me go and get rid of that, because that's another big bit of news a little bit later on tonight. But nevertheless, this was the beginning of the slaughter today that occurred against Russian forces that were attempting to push across this railroad berm. In the town of Stepove, we also saw a decent supply of M2 Bradleys still in the area attached to the 47th Magura Brigade. This one is in its atypical desert tan camo, or the unicolor desert camo that the US famously used in both Iraq and Afghanistan. It's a camouflage that everybody knows around the world, much less so the NATO tricolor SARC, which is the one that's actually used for US forces in Europe and also in Korea, or more so East Asia. Beyond that, however, we can see the 47th Brigade, of course, priding themselves on this incredible fighting machine. The M2 Bradley has proved to be an indispensable infantry fighting vehicle, and probably one of the best that the Ukrainians have in their armed forces inventory. It is a great vehicle all around, and not only that, we can see that the 47th Magura has a very eclectic mix of rifles, and we can also see a lot of different modifications attached to these rifles, especially in this picture right here. We have a what appears to be an AK-74 with a special kind of a M-lock and Picatinny rail mount attached to the front. We can also see a decent amount of M4s. We can see a traditional AK-74 right there. We can see a crank, an AK-74 SU, probably a crew member with a carbine like that. We can also see some other, maybe an AK-12 right there, even possibly. Another AK-74 and another heavily modded AK-74. Overall, it is very interesting to take a look at the kit of these infantrymen of the 47th Brigade, but still, most importantly, the Bradleys continue to protect these soldiers from the Russian offensives that are pushing over these plains from Krasnoyarivka and towards the Ukrainian front lines. Not only that, we got to see today, and this was published by OSINT Technical on Twitter, an absolute graveyard of tanks that has been created from failed Russian assaults time and time again, month after month, as they've been trying to make their way towards Stepove. And here's the clip right here. Now, if y'all can't tell, that's a lot. That is a lot of APCs. It's mostly BTRs, interestingly enough, showing that this may actually be some kind of a mechanized brigade, just a single mechanized brigade that has tried to attempt the same assault over and over and over, and has ended up failing multiple times. We can actually see that this is a BTR-80 back here that's somewhat intact, but the other BTRs closer to the front are not so intact. These things look like they've been obliterated by Ukrainian anti-tank fire and then finished off by FPV drones a little later and then burned completely out. Most of them even missing their tires, and some of them look like even the suspension has failed on the rotting husks. But nevertheless, we can see this massive destroyed Russian armored personnel carriers here, and this is on one of the roads towards Stupove. We can even see a destroyed main battle tank up here. Sadly, cannot tell what kind. It may be a T-90M, and also a knocked out BMP-2 that appears that it was attempting to retreat from the line because it's facing the opposite direction. It's going eastwards, but it looks like it may have been knocked out on the retreat. And then finally, over here to the left, we can see a couple of more destroyed BMPs and MTLBs. And then the video loops over again, but giving us a glimpse at the absolute carnage that the Ukrainians have been able to bring against the Russian forces in this area of Krasnoyarivka. We've also seen that not only has the 47th Magura been able to do this with great success time and time again, stopping these Russian assaults over the plain, but we also got to see that the 110th Brigade, a unit that is pretty much fighting hand-in-hand, side-by-side with the 47th Magura on this flank of the battlefield, has also been able to destroy a large amount of Russian armored forces just today, and they did an incredibly good job. Here's the clip showing the 110th hitting some Russian forces that were attempting to storm Avdiivka's northern flank. It's actually a little bit of a lengthy video, but still giving us a very good insight to what today's assaults appeared to look like. At the very beginning of this video, we can see that it is an armored personnel in an APC column headed off by one main battle tank. This is considered a smaller column. Usually we see that columns that are conducted by most mechanized and motorized brigades of the Russian army usually consists of around 3 main battle tanks and roughly 9 armored personnel carriers. So this thing appears to be a third of the size of a normal attack column, with only one, and that looks actually like a T-80BV to support the push. And we can see them slowly making their way across the fields, of course, following this well-carved-out path through the fields where they know there are no mines. And we can see right there that the Russian infantry are beginning to dismount, but the BMPs are continuing to move forward. There may have been something that just happened there that we did not see on film, because it appears that the column is still advancing, but they've lost about an entire squad of infantry because they jumped off or fell off of the first BMP in the column. But they continue to advance. The other BMP is probably running over the infantry that just hopped off. And as they continue to advance, we can see that they are, of course, keeping to that little path as best as they can. They're continuing to try and advance, but I have a feeling this is about to end up in disaster. As many of y'all know, the Russians always end in disaster. And we see the 110th Brigade just patiently biding their time and waiting for the proper moment to strike, to knock out this Russian column. They're continuing to advance over these flat, wide open fields, and this is something that you gotta admit, it's pretty crazy to think that the Russians advance through open fields like this. The Russians are really in a suicidal situation here if you look at it from a strategic perspective on this battlefield. To try and advance over these open plains, they have to take their columns, and they just have to push them through an open field. There's no other way to get to Stupove or any other part of the northern flank of Avdiivka, because the entire area is situated on the Ukrainian steppe, which is literally just this endless plain that goes on for dozens of miles in every single direction. It appears that they have been dealing with a situation not too well, because, and what's odd, actually, what's really crazy about this, is that Soviet-era doctrine, which is what the Russian Federation uses, actually is entirely focused on fighting through open plains like this, usually involving heavy armored assaults along with a great deal of artillery support. That is the Soviet-era doctrine, and the Russians still use that to this day. But it seems as though they are never able to actually implement that doctrine on a wider level, usually because of a failure of command and also a failure to properly communicate to other parts of the units. So with that in mind, we see that in the end, only these column-like assaults, either incredibly large columns or incredibly small ones, are the ones that are able to advance over these open fields near Avdiivka. And they have absolutely no support. We never see them being supported by Russian artillery or any other kind of fire support for that matter, and they are pretty much left to fend for themselves and pray that they can make it to a Ukrainian line at all. We can now see the tank looping around, actually, And we could see the BMPs continuing to come forward, and the first one was just lost in a hellfire. Call that, call that hellfire and brimstone, because it looks like that thing just got obliterated by an ATGM. We can see that the other two BMPs are now staggering for a moment, trying to figure out what to do, as the first BMP was blown up so fiercely, it has been split in two, and now blocks the entire path for the other BMPs. We can see crew members hopping out and running, and we can also see that it appears that the rest of the infantry, watching that BMP get obliterated so thoroughly, have already gone into a rout, hopping off of their BMPs and running away from the battlefield and back towards Russian lines. We can also see the tank has apparently been spooked pretty badly, because it's now already leaving without providing any support whatsoever. The 110th is now back on the field with another drone, and it appears that the tank just got hit as well. Oh, things are getting really bad now. And yep, the tank was hit and the crew is bailing out. So the tank is now a loss as well. We don't know. We have no idea where the other two BMPs went at this point, because in between this little blackout that y'all saw just a moment ago in the clip, that was when that drone was probably running low on battery, and they had to send that one back and then send a brand new drone out to observe what was going on. So it may have been another minute and a half that passed that we did not get to see what happened. I'm assuming, considering that we see these big ruts in the middle of their track, the BMPs literally turned in place, a complete 180, and just fled off the field without any of the infantry hopping back on. Now we can see the three tankers, all having survived the hit that was caused to this T-80BV, they're now all running in very close order off the field as well. We can see the first BMP that was split in two by the force of the explosion still sitting there, and we can now see the Ukrainians bringing in some kind of anti-tank fire and trying to knock out this T-80BV. We now see that the AT fire is also supported by artillery fire, as they're still trying to destroy the T-80BV. Now here's our BMP. It was a BMP-1. And it appears that the angle that we're looking at this from is actually the opposite angle from what we were originally watching, the original perspective, because we can see that this side was severely damaged. In fact, parts of the hull were literally just blown away, along with the doors and most of the infantry compartment. The tracks were completely blown off as well. The turret, in fact, was uprooted from its position and shifted off to the right by maybe a foot, because we can see this massive hole right here where the turret ring actually is. It looks like this BMP got obliterated, and I'm pretty sure that this was a very demoralizing thing to watch for the guys in the back who watched this thing turn into vapor, pretty much. And we can see the T-80, this is, in fact, a T-80BV. That was correct. It appears that this got hit somewhere along the engine bay. We can see some damage to the engine bay, and we can also see some damage to the front right of the tank as well, although we never saw anything on film that would kind of back up the notion that something did hit it on the front right part of the tank near the leading bogie, or the wheel. And we can see them continuing to observe the T-80BV, and we can see some Russians were still left behind with that Bradley. We see him trying to stamp out some flames, you know, just normal stuff. And we can see them continuing to watch the Bradley burn. I mean, the BMP burn. We see another guy down here. He's just chilling. You know, he's just enjoying the shade that the BMP is providing. And let's see, a little bit later on. Oh my god. What happened? Oh my god. Wait, is that the tank? Hold up, y'all. I think that's either the BMP later on in the day or the tank. That, folks, looks to be the T-80 a little bit later on in the day. It looks as though it got vaporized. I have no idea what vaporized it. But whatever it is, whether it be the BMP or the T-80, I have a feeling that your local oil change shop is going to be a little hard-pressed to figure out how to repair that one. I would say a little bit of armor all on the dash, that ought to fix it, but no low balls, I know what I got. And that, folks, is no doubt, at this point, no doubt at all, that is the T-80, because the this looks to be the rear part of the vehicle that still exists. And also, let me go get this real quick, because I got to show y'all why. I got to give some backup for this, so that way I don't sound like I'm just talking out of my ass. You know, not to say that so abruptly, but got to make sure I'm covering all the bases here. So T-80s have this unique little exhaust port on the very back of the tank that is rectangular in shape and is directly centered at the back of the hull. And when we look at this video, you can see that little protrusion of that rectangular exhaust vent that is the direct center of the hull. So this appears that this is in fact the T-80BV. So 100%, that is not an APC that got disintegrated like that. That is a full-on main battle tank. A pretty okay one, actually. T-80s are not that bad of a main battle tank for Soviet-era vehicles, but it got blown away. I wish we could have seen what that explosion looked like, because we could even see over here, this had enough force that it took the multi-ton front plate, because that right there, that like oval-shaped hole, appears to be the opening for the driver's hatch. It took that multi-ton plate, flung it up in the air, and then just had it land over here. Let's see if we can see, like, the turret or anything like that. Let's see here. So, wait a minute. I think they may have been looking at the... Wait a minute. That looks to maybe to be the front of the T-80. And then down here, we can see some of the suspension lying around. I do not see the turret. The turret's just lost at this point. We can see some of the wheels... and of course, what appears to be the transmission at the back of the T-80, which was really the only thing that survived. But with that, that's the end of that clip. But I'm getting the idea that y'all know the 110th Brigade literally beat some Russians to death today out there in the fields, and it looks like they did a damn good job. But we also got to see that the 110th was pulling out their FPV drones to try and hit some of these Russian tanks as well, because not everything, of course, is done with anti-tank weapons and artillery. A large amount of Ukrainian anti-tank weaponry is conducted through drone warfare these days, brand new and cutting-edge innovation on the battlefield, especially in the form that we see it now. And we see the 110's pretty cool intro. They're throwing up the gang signs. And we can see the 110's bringing in their FPV drone onto the back of this BMP here and hitting it dead on. Right at the back of the crew compartment. Right there. Hang on, y'all. I think this might be adding 2 and 2 together. Let's check out this one here. What's that? Uh-huh. Y'all, I think we got a good idea here. Folks, y'all would not believe this. This is actually the drone footage from the last clip we saw. We can actually play these. Let me go grab the other one. We can actually play these side by side, because this is showing both perspectives of the whole story. This is actually pretty damn cool. So, to show y'all what happened, now we know that the Ukrainians weren't even using an AT weapon at the start. It's just that the camera had such a low resolution that we could never see the drone at that distance that hit the first BMP. So let me take this, and let me get this video here as well, because now it's all coming together. So let me skip forward in this one. Okay, so right there, when that BMP blew up, right here, that was this drone hitting that BMP. Because notice, and let me make sure I'm getting this correct, because I'm getting really excited here. I think I might be getting ahead of myself a little bit. There were like 2 truck tracks near that area, or really road tracks. And we can see that BMP get hit. And one second, everyone, let me make sure to get in here and get rid of that bot. Thank you, everyone, for pointing that out. The Lee Spring Army is doing work. Put an LSA in the chat for getting rid of a bot and helping me to smite him. But that right there, that explosion appears to be this one right here caught on film, if the locations are the same, because we can see that BMP get hit, and then we can see this drone moving along what appeared to be a semicircular track, which is where that tank was. Let me skip forward a little bit. Right here, watch, this T-80 is leaving the field, but later on, when you see it come to a stop right there, and it's canted a little bit to the right off track of the actual ruts made in the road. So going off of those ruts, and then looking at this video, this T-80 here, because this is in fact another T-80, we can tell by the exhaust port on the back of the tank, This appears to be the exact same one that we just saw in the other clip. So the drone comes down, hits that one, and it looks like they had another drone come in and hit the T-80. And there we go, it hit. And it looks like there was even another one that hit. One of these apparently caused the nuclear explosion that would rip apart that T-80. And now we can actually see them attacking small Russian trenches around the area as they're trying to knock out any of the Russian forces that remain. But nevertheless, just to add together the two clips as much as we could, that footage, the drone footage we're watching in this clip here, is actually the footage of them knocking out this assault on this clip. So they're pretty much the same, but different perspectives. But nevertheless, moving on into this actual clip and getting on into it, we can see that one hit a Russian trench. We can now see them moving on and getting this another T-80, whatever brigade the Russians are using in this area, apparently primarily uses T-80s, which is actually kind of high end for the Russians at this point in the war, because mostly these days we either see the VDV using a T-90M, which is literally the top of the line for the Russians, it's the best they can get, or every other unit is using T-72As, T-72Bs, or T-62Ms. So pretty high-end tanks that the 47th and 110th find themselves going up against, but they're still dealing with them flawlessly and knocking them out pretty damn well. And you see them going here for a Russian that's hiding by a burned-out car, and it looks like he didn't succeed in that. Yep, he didn't. And I gotta say, I love seeing all the LSAs in the chat, y'all. I love to know the Lee Spring Army is as strong and triumphant now as it was for 2 whole years, nearly at this point. Oh, that drone. Oh, that was close. That was really close. That's the end of the clip. But the 110th was really putting in the work on the Russians today and making sure that they're reminded why they should not be in Ukraine. It's a dangerous place, and OSHA does not exist inside of Ukraine. Go where it's safe. And that's not Ukraine, that's back to Russia. But beyond that, this battlefield has not really been seeing that many massive frontline shifts over the past 24 hours. And once again, with the Ukrainians trying to conduct a defensive of the city, no major advances does show that the Ukrainians are still conducting a majorly successful defensive battle. This has been going on since the beginning of October. And so when you consider in that this battle has been going on for nearly 3.5 months, and there hasn't been any major frontline shifts over 3.5 months, the Ukrainians are doing a very good job. And the casualty report again today was of course high, and showing that apparently the Russian offensives are being poorly conducted, much like we saw on film. They're still taking pretty high losses, they're still losing a decent amount of tanks and also armored personnel carriers, and inevitably losing a high number of infantry. All of that coming together to once again culminate in bad communication, bad training, and poor doctrinal practices of the Russian army, and an amazing and successful Ukrainian defensive on the other side of the coin. But moving on from that news in Avdiivka, there's a little bit of big news that I wanted to run by y'all for a moment. Because while it's not included in the news segment tonight, I can tell y'all that if tensions continue to rise in this region, much like they have been over the past day, this will become a news segment once again on the channel. As many of y'all know, the Houthis have continued to try and conduct anti-ship operations against really any vessels passing through the southern Red Sea, and ended up striking a oil tanker last night, leading to a massive fire. The ship was abandoned by the crew, and the USS Carney and also a French frigate arrived at the scene and spent 20 hours trying to extinguish the flames. The United States is warning the Houthis that if such provocative actions continue, the airstrikes will continue. We'll be, of course, moving into that news probably tomorrow, because the situation is becoming so serious that people are actually talking about the United States conducting some kind of a peacekeeping operation against the Houthis inside of Houthi-controlled Yemen. But beyond that, just wanted to run that by y'all because it's a major thing going on in the world right now, and I've seen some of y'all mentioning that to us on Twitter, and I gotta thank everyone who's been pointing that out to us and talking about it, because it is certainly becoming a serious ordeal, and one where we may see the United States spring into action and actually start quashing these Houthis. But moving on back towards this Avdiivka battlefield, just because I took a quick moment to address a whole big thing that's going on elsewhere that we will probably start to cover here soon. It's time for us to move back to talking about the Russian offensives, because much like we saw in these videos, Russian offensives rely entirely on having a large amount of armor to field their infantry with. They have to have a high amount of armored personnel carriers, and they also have to have a high number of tanks. Because of that, the Russians have been losing exorbitantly high numbers of tanks and armored personnel carriers, especially in this failed offensive at Avdiivka, and also the smaller offensive at the very beginning of last year near Volodar, where a equally large number of Russian tanks were lost, although the town was a lot smaller. Beyond that, however, a lot of people are always talking about, are the Russians going to run out of tanks within a certain set of time? And really, nowadays, everyone's kind of eyeballing the idea that the Russians will probably run out of tanks maybe within the next year. And it's a big question, and a lot of people have different inputs on it, whether they think the tanks will run out or whether they won't. And there's a lot of factors to consider there that doesn't really give us a clear picture and leads to a lot of ambiguity as to how long can the Russians keep up an armored attack like this without running out of vehicles to be able to conduct an offensive with. And so many of y'all actually say, out of about the 2,000 of y'all who inputted on this, a lot of y'all said it was literally split. I mean, down the middle. Half of y'all said yes, half of y'all said no, and then the remainder, like 1 out of every 4 of y'all or 1 out of every 5 of y'all said maybe, and kind of held out some an answer really, and just were saying, you know, I'll wait and see. I've got to be honest with y'all, it could go either way. It could be that the Russians run out of tanks within this next year and armored personnel carriers, or it could be that they don't. I mean, the Russians do have a massive amount of tanks on paper, and of course all of y'all know the story about the tanks on paper. They're all in graveyards that have been rotting for decades, and those tanks are most likely not usable without a massive amount of refurbishments. While those refurbishments are costly, expensive, and time-consuming, and it also limits the number of tanks that they can actually start to introduce to the front lines, and thus greatly reducing their offensive abilities because they have to factor in the attrition rate for their tanks and also the replacement and replenishment rates behind the lines domestically at their tank factories or tractor factories, it is still something that the Russians have to seriously think about. And we actually don't have a good metric on how many tanks the Russians really are able to produce in a single year of each variant. We have started to see a lot more T-90Ms than they had pre-war, suggesting that somehow they are upgrading their T-90As into T-90Ms, and we're starting to see an introduction of those in larger numbers to the front. But we're starting to also see that apparently that's a pretty limited ability of the Russians. A lot of the tanks that we're seeing introduced these days that are, you know, quote-unquote new, are T-62Ms, an ancient tank, a T-55, also a very ancient model of tank, or T-72s and the very early iterations of the T-72, like the T-72A or the T-72B. We still don't know how many of those they are refurbishing, and also, one has to remember that every tank rots worse or better than others, and that means that some of those tanks in those tank graveyards may have been sitting idly since 1991, since the collapse of the Soviet Union, and they have rotted through so thoroughly and have been so poorly maintained that they may as well just be scrap metal and never are able to be converted back into an operational tank. So that would lead to the idea, just off of that, if there's a very finite number of tanks that they can actually refurbish and put into service, they may run out of tanks within a year. But if that number is a lot greater, the refurbishable number of tanks is greater than what we're actually thinking it is, they may actually be able to hold out for another year or so, maybe really just another year, before they start to seriously reel from armored losses. Someone said, Bad Dog said, haven't they increased production? Yes, they have, from what we understand, but the production is still quite limited. Russia's major industries practically do not exist the way they did in the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union's logistics are entirely different than what the Russian Federation is able to do. And the Russian Federation, along with a lot of former Soviet republics, much like Ukraine, kind of live in the former shadow of the Soviet Union's industrial abilities. The Soviet Union's logistics and supply lines span the entirety of the Union, going all the way from having parts shipped from Uzbekistan into Russia, and then parts shipped from Ukraine into Russia, or parts from Russia and Kazakhstan shipped to Ukraine where they would be produced. that is really what led to the Soviet Union being able to produce these tens of thousands of armored personnel carriers and tanks that still officially are out there on the spreadsheets. And, you know, the Russians claim that those are tanks that they have. But nowadays, that stuff is just not possible because of import and export restrictions, also because of the war with Ukraine. And another very important thing to note about manufacturing of tanks, like for the Russians specifically, is that the Ukrainian Soviet Republic, because Ukraine was actually a semi-republic in the Soviet Union. Let me go pull this up real quick. Map of the USSR. Let me go grab this. This is very important to remember that when we talk about the Soviet Union, there actually were, and let's see, when was this map made? Sadly, it does not say. I'm assuming that this map was made in like the 19, hell, I have no idea because it's not including the Baltic states. That's really odd. I think this may be a World War II map or something because I'm like, geez, like there's no Baltic states, there's hardly any Belarus. Let me go find another map for y'all because that one's not going to be good enough. So here we go. So this is an actual map of what the Soviet Union looked like, and it's very important to know about this to speak with any kind of a competency on what post-Soviet logistics look like. All of these separate countries were a part of the Soviet Union. And while the Soviet Union here in the West is always considered just to be this giant amalgamation, kind of like this, you know, everyone just sees that, it was made up of separate republics. And these republics are the ones that broke away in 1990 to 91 that ended up dissoluting the Soviet Union. And Ukraine, specifically, was one of those Soviet republics, along with Moldova. But more importantly, Ukraine. And Ukraine's job, pretty much in the Soviet Union, was to be a breadbasket of the entire nation and to also produce a lot of high-end technical components that the Russians would use for weapon systems. So if you ever think of anything like the T-64BV, which I talked about last night on air, or the T-80, or, for example, ATGM systems like the Concours or the Fago, a lot of their complex computer systems were actually produced in the Ukrainian SSR. And when the Soviet Union collapsed, now we can see, obviously, clearly now, because the Russians are at war with Ukraine, they're not going to be able to get a lot of those computer components that the Ukrainians were able to produce. But there's also a bit of a double-edged sword to that. Because Ukraine is no longer a part of the Soviet Union, a lot of the components that they kind of outsourced from other Soviet republics, they're not able to get. So, if, for example, the Stan series countries in the very southern part of the Soviet Union usually produced a decent amount of the basic materials that would then be used by the Ukrainians to produce these advanced components. But now, because of how the Soviet Union collapsed, they're not really able to get access to that much, and so Ukrainian industrial abilities have also been decently curtailed because they're not able to get easy access to the components and materials that they needed from the Stan series countries. So you can kind of tell that it's a bit of a huge conundrum for really anyone to have the industrial war, the war industry abilities that they had in Soviet times. So I would say, in my opinion, I do not think that the Russians are going to run out of tanks within this next year. I'm actually going to have to go with a slight majority of y'all that said no. I don't think they will. I think we'll probably see that the Russians continue to pump out a very minor number of tanks, probably some very archaic ones like the T-62s and T-55s, and occasionally a T-90M here and there, but it's not going to be a massive amount. I think within the next year, outside of right now, starting now, a year later and over that, I think they will start to run into some very big problems trying to get enough tanks to field. But with that, I hope that does address that poll well, because it's a very interesting one, and a very big question for the Russians, because without those tanks and armored personnel carrier doctrines, tanks and armored personnel carriers, their doctrines are pretty much useless, because their battlefield doctrines rely entirely on the use of tanks and armored personnel carriers. If they do not have those, the strategies of the Russian army literally fall apart, because it doesn't have its primary component. But moving on from that, and speaking of industrial abilities like I was talking about in the former Soviet Union, we have seen that the Ukrainians have been trying to find ways to increase the size of their air force, and even brought MiG-29 here in this picture out of storage. You can tell that this thing has been stored in somewhat harsher conditions, but it was made battle ready, at least according to what we know. put into fighting condition and pulled out of deep storage. Hopefully they give it a new paint job, because this thing looks like it's been beat up inside of its hangar wherever it was stored for a while. But still, it is good to know that the Ukrainians are trying anything they can to make sure that their air force is hopefully growing a little bit throughout the war. Of course, Ukraine is still waiting on the F-16s, and sadly, we haven't really gotten a lot of good news or information here on our end about what's really going to be going on with the F-16s, when they're really going to arrive. We know that the Dutch ones, well, actually, let me think. I think it was the Danish ones or the Dutch ones, were withheld for about another 8 months to possibly another year, and we're not really getting any good explanations as to why that's happening. We're just kind of hearing that that's the thing now. Apparently, you don't get a massive amount of F-16s when you're told you're going to get them. They just will never show up. But still, hopefully they will, and it's good to see that Ukraine is doing everything they can in the meantime to try and keep their air force running and at least keep some aircraft in the sky. But moving on from that little bit of news and towards our location unknowns, we have some really interesting ones to cover tonight. And starting off with our first one, I really like this because, as y'all know, the Russians like rocket artillery. They have a song called Katyusha, which pretty much worships this old World War II era multiple launch rocket system that became famous. Y'all probably know the song. But nowadays, they're called Grads. And we got to see the BB drone hit the cab of this thing and literally flattened it. It looks like some kind of a CCKW from World War II. But I got to say, it's funny to see stuff like this because it looks like a Looney Tunes thing, you know? It's like a little guy came up with a big hammer and quashed the cab on this thing and just crushed it. But still, I like to see it. Very happy to know that the Ukrainians are at least harassing the Grads and making sure that they're less usable. Call this thing a Corvette Grad, but look out, Kennedy. It looks like someone's up in the tower with the Carcana. But moving on from that and into our next little clip, we also got to see the Freedom of Russia Legion still conducting training for new recruits. We can see right here that all their faces are blurred out, but we also got to see them training with an M4. We can also see like a blank adapter, I believe that is, on the front of that M4. And also really interesting, it has a carry handle upper. Oh, pretty cool. I like the carry handles, by the way. When you see them aiming at a target. I mean, that's not far. That's like 20 yards. But still, anyways, we can also see them continuing training with the M4. Overall, really nice to see that the Freedom of Russia Legion is still taking on new recruits, and hopefully their training will come in handy. And moving on from that and into our next little clip, we also got to see something really funny today. We got to see a Russian soldier get captured, which is always funny in its own right, because, you know, the second best army in the world surrendering to some guys in Ukraine. I mean, that's just ridiculous. But what's even better is that this goofball was wearing an American flag. So here's the clip, and it doesn't really require much more explanation than that.
Въебу, блядь. Каже.
Блядь, не придурюйтесь, ну ви заїбали.
Да клянусь, не знаю, что это за...
Як ти не знав, що це за флаг?
Ну, американский флаг.
Сука.
Если бы она обезьяна в селе жила, нахуй.
Ні, ну це
It appears that the Russian, in his hatred of America, ended up wearing an American flag. I gotta say, I love to see their stupidity come and bite them every time. Is to be like, I hate America, and wear like a NASA hoodie. Or this guy in particular will go, I'm fighting against the evil, wicked ways of the West. And he'll wear an American flag on his uniform. I gotta say, Stolen Valor has never been this funny before. But nevertheless, you get it, Russian peasant man. You get it. And you're going to be moving on from that location unknown news clip and into our next one, because this one, oh, I love it. These are cool. So, as y'all may know, the Ukrainians have recently gotten this thing called the M1040, which is a 105 millimeter, and let's see, what do they call it here? A canister shell. Good, because I was about to say, if they call it a cluster, I'm going to be like, that's not true. This is a canister shot. Oh boy. If y'all know what a canister shot is, good for you. If you do not know what a canister shot is, I'm about to tell you what a canister shot is. So let me go pull this up. Because I got to show y'all what this thing is. Canister shot. Tank. Let me go find that real quick. Oh, let's see here. I think we actually have a clip of it right here. Let me go check this. Oh, dang, that's not a good one. Okay. I gotta find a good one here, y'all, because y'all got to see what this is, what it does. Oh, wait a minute, this one might be it. Yes! Okay, so I found it. So, let me drag this over here for y'all. And so, let me explain. So, what this is, I'll just show you. You know, here's the clip. Oh. So, now, to explain, after we watch the clip, what a canister shot is, this goes all the way back in the day, to the times of the 1600s. So way back in the day, folks had these things called cannons. And cannons, in short, are what's in the tanks nowadays, but they're bigger and a lot better. I'll go pull up a Napoleon gun, so that way I can show you all this, because Napoleon cannon. Let me go grab one. Here we go. This will be good enough. Here's a little picture of a cannon. So back then, infantry would march across the field, and sometimes they would be ordered to do something that many people would know at the time is suicidal, which is to go and attack an artillery position, like a cannon position. And so the cannons would load their cannons, but then they would start loading, at least in like normal practice, I'm sure many Americans are about to tell you how they just load like forks and stuff in there, but in proper military drill, there was these special made canister shots that you would load into the barrel, and what it does is it pretty much turns the gun into this freaking massive shotgun. That's literally what it does. The spread is huge. The amount of pellets that's firing, depending on their size, could be a few pretty big but also pretty numerous pieces of shot, or it could be quite small, and you could just have a massive spread of these deadly bullet-sized pellets flying at you. In the modern day, people still believe in the concept of the canister shot, or the grape shot. Some people call it grape shot, because that's also a pretty common name. But I call it canister shot, because I believe that's what it was called in the Royal Navy, which was a very common user, really every Navy at the time was, but for some reason in my mind, the Royal Navy was the most common user of canister shot, usually because they their naval doctrine at sea was to board other ships, fight on them, and then take them, or capture them. But beyond that, in the modern day, canister shot is still a great thing. And just like it was back in the day, canister shot is used to fight primarily against infantry. The West has given 105mm canister rounds for the Leopard 1A5. So to explain how the Leopard 1A5 will probably now be used, they're probably going to load this thing up with canister shot, drive it up to a Russian trench, blast this thing pretty much with a 105mm shotgun, and then the infantry will push in. Or they'll just blast the trench and then move on. Regardless, giving the Ukrainians the ability to fire a tank-sized shotgun is pretty damn good, and I hope to see one day that we'll get to watch that being used against Russian forces, and I bet, I don't even have to hope, I bet it will be very effective. Moving on from that, and into our last little bit of location unknown news, we got to see the Russian casualty report for the past 24 hours, and the numbers were quite good. 770 Russian soldiers wiped out, along with 15 armored personnel carriers, 8 supply trucks, 6 tanks, 3 artillery pieces, 4 drones, and 8 bombcat skid steers. Overall, of course, the infantry number was great, but the numbers in other categories are a little low today. But I'm sure that tomorrow's numbers, since tomorrow's numbers are actually today's numbers, will actually be quite high. But still, nevertheless, 8 from that, and of course, incredible to see that the Ukrainians are once again holding the line and continuing to inflict some pretty good losses onto Russian forces. But moving on from that, it's time for us to start moving towards the front lines and covering the news here. And there's actually been a decent amount of tank-on-tank, or more so just tank action going on in the Northeast as things have heated up over the past 24 hours. But before we get into that, I've got to say that I would like to thank Dad Good so much for the $50 super chat. And Dad Good said, "Another good stream, thanks. Where did the Soviets get their money from after World War II? Did they have more than Russia?" Now, technically, Dad Good, the Soviet Union always had more funds than really any of the former Soviet republics have at this point, including the Russian Federation. The Soviet economy was approximated, because the issue is that nobody was able to get a really good read on the Soviet economy because it was a closed economy and they very rarely ever did business with the outside world to have a real GDP. But from what we understand, it's well, the concept of the Soviet economy, it was estimated that somewhere in the 70s, I think they were around the modern day equivalent of like 13 trillion, which was pretty good. It's still way behind the United States at the time, but still not that bad. The Soviet Union had really no money after World War II. A lot of the European nations had no money. But for the Soviet Union, that didn't really matter. They didn't need currency, they just needed guns to be able to tell people what to do and then execute the dissidents that disagreed with what they needed to do. So from what I understand, they didn't have really any money after World War II at all. They just kind of had manpower, and that was kind of the currency that the Soviet Union worked through, was largely manpower on any real level. Of course, the Russians did have money. To say that they didn't would be untrue. I believe it was called a kopeck. But beyond that, the small side note that they did have kopecks and stuff like that, the Soviet Union did clearly have, throughout most of its history, more money than the Russian Federation would have today relative to them. But with that, I hope that does address that quite well. And we are on to the next one. And let me make sure to grab the next one real quick, because the spreadsheet always wants to be a little quirky here and there. And oh, look at it. But moving on to the next one, we have a 20 from Truth Trooper, and thank you for your first super chat ever, Truth Trooper, in helping the channel to keep running. And Truth Trooper said, long-time listener and always look forward to the stream. Ukraine defense will hold against tyrannical Putin and keep up the great work. And thank you so much for the support, and I will keep up the great work. And also, thank you so much for being a long-time listener and supporting the channel. Why in the world did I stutter through that, y'all? I don't know why. Thank you so much for supporting the channel, because folks like you who support the channel help me to make this thing possible. I can not thank y'all enough, because if it wasn't for y'all, I wouldn't be able to keep alive behind the scenes to make this thing a daily reality. And so thank you so much for being a longtime listener, now supporter, and also helping me to keep this thing going. And of course, Ukraine will hold against Putin. Put a Slava Ukraini in the chat if you agree with that. And with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And of course, we are on to the last question of the segment, which is a $20 super chat from Jocelyn White. And he said, keep up the great work and Slava Ukraini. And thank you so much, Jocelyn White, for the support and helping this channel to keep running, because folks like you help to make this thing possible. And of course, your support is helping me to keep up the great work. And so thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are now going to be moving on out of that question segment, but thank you once again to everyone for their support and helping this channel to keep on rolling. And we're now going to be moving on into the frontline news across the rest of Ukraine, all the way from the northeast down to the area of Bachmat, of course skipping over Avdiivka, because we already covered that battlefield very early on in the stream, and then we're going to be moving further south than that and covering the very eastern side of the southern front, and also a little bit of news that happened in Mariupol today. So moving on into the northeastern area, we have not seen, from what I understand, any frontline changes in this area over 24 hours. Actually, we have. It was a minor change near Avdiivka, and we could see that the Russians apparently advanced about 50 meters. So great job on them. I'm sure they're very happy about that, and about 900 Russians were lost for that 50-meter gain. But moving on into the area of Tavolzhanka, we did get to see that the 60th Brigade of the Ukrainian Army was using one of their tanks today to fire on Russians at a point-blank range. Sadly, I'm going to have to mute that music, but we can see here our Ukrainian T-64 rolling up. I pull up! We can see him making his way in there. And now blasting the Russian position at literal point-blank range, pretty much just poking the barrel right into their trench and then obliterating it. And we see him hitting the trenches up here. We also see some other explosion on the tree line. Don't know what that was about. Maybe it's Russian artillery. And also, Dante, from what I understand, there's only about 115 million Russians in the Russian Federation today, but I may be incorrect with that. And we see this tank continuing to take its time, hitting really every position it wants. We can even see the Russian trench actually skittering its way through this tree line here, and this tank is literally just firing up and down it however it wants. We can see it continuing to take its time, hitting Russian positions as it wants to. Not as it needs to, as it wants to. Because this is a leisure stroll for the Ukrainian tank. There's no anti-tank weapons in the area, so it can do whatever it wants. And let's see here, and I got to thank Marcia Tucker for throwing in the population number, because it is 143 million people living in the Russian Federation, compared to Ukraine's 43.79 million. And then, funnily enough, Japan is not that far away from Russia, only having a mere 126 million people approximately. But really, for all three of those countries, the numbers are kind of evening out and actually starting to decline due to demographics reasons, but that's a really in-depth analysis really for each country on a case-by-case basis. We see the Ukrainians continuing to lay down that tank fire. I wonder how the Russians feel. You know, just getting hit like 30 yards away from a tank, and nothing can stop it from happening. As seen in the clip, but still showing the 60th Brigade's great efforts and incredible work. And moving on from that and into the area of Persho-Trevene, or Treneve, we got to see a Ukrainian tank passing by another tank. It's tank-on-tankception, and disproves the Russian myth that there's only one Ukrainian tank left, because alas, there are two in this video.
Here we can see the Ukrainian tank in its natural environment, driving through the snowy fields, looking for its prey. And of course, it spots it very quickly. The BMP.
And this little guy's getting jiggy with it. Hey, get it? Oh, look at him. He's having a fun time listening to this music. The same music we've been hearing for 2 years. It's like a dog getting the same food every day for its entire life. Which my corgis actually live that kind of a life. But nevertheless, that's the end of the clip. And I gotta say, one hell of a video. Love to see it. Moving on from that and down into the area of Kuzamivka, we also got to see some paratroopers from the 81st Brigade. Now, I gotta say, paratroopers are pretty cool as a unit, and we could see a traditional AK-74 and maybe an AK-74M, because, you know, got some black plastic furniture on it. Oh, watch out, Russia. You got a little better. And let's see here. We can also see the high-cut helmets, pretty common these days. It looks like everyone's using them. And then in this last picture, we can actually see some PAS GT helmets. My helmet, I love those. And another high-cut. Looks like it's actually from the exact... no, that's actually a completely different soldier wearing that high-cut helmet. But still, some pictures of the 81st Brigade in this area of the line, and of course, doing their thing. And they always do their thing well. There's no doubt about that in my mind whatsoever. Moving on from that area of the northeastern front, and a little bit further down, and into the area of Kremenna, we have seen once again that over the past 24 hours, there has been literally no change in the front lines. Once again showing that the Ukrainian defense has proven to be very successful, and they're doing a great job. We got to see that the Russians were, of course, dismayed because the Ukrainians boarded an MTLB on the front line and left. Something the Russians never get to do. And also, let's see here, Melody Francis, I think, said, Enforcer can't take that music for much longer. I think it's affecting him. I've got to be honest, y'all. I've heard every single song so many times at this point. I honestly have gotten to the point I hate about half of them. Like this one. Like, I can tell you, I'll play it in a second, but I can tell you exactly how it's going to go. And watch, here's the clip. It's just so annoying. It's like, I get it, they're popular songs for the war, but it's been 2 years, and I've shown y'all like 20-something thousand clips, and I've heard this song, this one, at least over 2,000 times. It's like Mariah Carey's All I Want for Christmas Is You at this point. But we can see them getting loaded up onto this MTLB. and getting ready to leave. And so with that, that's the end of the clip. But I gotta say, wonderful to see the Ukrainians doing their thing and getting an ability to leave and hopefully go on leave. Meanwhile, just a little bit south of Kremenna Forest, there was a little bit of action going on towards Avdiivka today. We got to see that the Ukrainians hit a Russian Grad in the area around Avdiivka right here. And oh, this might be some new music. That is new. I've never heard that one. Very happy to hear different music. And TS, are you starting to hear the sound in your sleep? Yeah, because when I go to sleep now, I'll sit there and in my nightmare, some eldritch being of horror from the war will come at me, and then I hear, and I'm like, oh my god, it's just terrible. But we can see this this unit here just blasting the Russian Grads, and the Russians are not very Grad about this. We can see another Grad here about to get obliterated. And we can see that the FPVs are just continuing to get them. And David M. said, I love the music, but I strongly dislike your mockery of it with your lack of singing ability. Well, David M., I know. My singing abilities are not that well. But your mom's singing abilities, they're very good. Let me tell you, buddy, she can sing a song. But anyways, we can see the Russian Grads continuing to get obliterated. And, you know, I can drop by her house tonight, and I can make sure that she sings tonight, if you know what I mean. But nevertheless, we can see some Grad getting hit near this, what I would say is like the Twilight Zone, because every single one of these houses is the exact same. And we see another Grad here. It's just kind of chilling. And you see the Grad blowing up like the live chat right now because the live chat is on fire. But with that, that's the end of that little clip, and wonderful to see that the Ukrainians were able to knock themselves, knock out a little bit of a Grad here and there, or as I was about to say, a Gradly. But moving on from that and into the next clip, we also got to see that a Russian tank got blown up today, very nearby to Avdiivka. Here's the clip. And we can see them here getting ready to drop the bomblet right in the hatch. And Dante, I might be able to try doing that voice. I'll have to give it some practice off air, though, because I've never done that one. But I'll give it a try. And also, thank you so much for pointing that out. I'm going to take a look through this chat here. Oh, no, y'all. It was a bot. Oh, goodness. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone in the LSA, for pointing that guy out. He's not here anymore. But look at this light show. Isn't it beautiful? I love light shows like that, me personally. It always reminds me of those raves, you know, that I never go to. It's like I never go to those. And I'm not saying that sarcastically, I never do. But we can see the tank continuing to explode and burn. It's funny, David M. said something very mean and very rude. And then I came back with something, and I've never seen David M. again. He disappeared. I'll hear about him on Reddit, though. It's like, I'll see somewhere that someone creates a new subthread going, the Enforcer sucks. I sat there and chat on him on air, and then he retorted against me, and now I hate him, and I have a blood feud against him. And, you know, whatever, cry about it. But anyways, when you see the tank continuing to roast, a nice roast T-72. And of course, slaw. It's so that this is the end of the clip, and I love to see it. It's beautiful to see. But we're going to be moving on from that little clip and a little bit further down our lines and towards the area of the Bachmat battlefield. Because the Bachmat battlefield is always something that is fun and interesting. It is, well, of course, I'm just kidding about the whole fun side of things, but it is always an interesting part of the front lines. And we got to see a little picture today of a Ukrainian soldier firing a 60mm mortar. And, whoops, it's actually a video. So sorry, everyone, but here's the video. Oh, that's another one. I bet you. Watch. Yep, there we go. So, here we go. We can see him firing off with a small infantry mortar. Oh, goodness. Y'all are so mean in the live chat. Like, goodness gracious. But I gotta tell y'all this, I know little 60mm mortars are almost like pop-pop guns, pretty much, in the big scheme of things, but I love them because they're so small. They're cute, you know? They're just very cute little mortars, and I think they're just cool. I think they're just the neatest. But anyways, moving on from that and into our only other clip in the Bachmat area, we also got to see a Ukrainian soldier making a snow angel in a crater. This crater was filled with water, and then because of the cold, it freezed over. So this Ukrainian soldier took advantage and decided that he would get on top of the frozen water here in this crater, and then he would make a snow angel. Isn't it beautiful? I gotta tell you, it's great to see. I love to see it. It's wonderful to know. And you know, it's just beautiful. It's just beautiful. It's perfection in the middle of a war. Incredible stuff. But beyond that, the battlefield at Bachmat was relatively quiet today, from what I understand. Over the past 24 hours, the front line has changed minimally. It appears that the Russians made about literally a minutia of an advance. I can't even really make that into anything. It looks like they moved like 10 yards, and that was about it. So that is what it is. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that quite well, and we're going to be moving on out of the Bachmat area and down towards the rear lines of Avdiivka. Because I forgot to mention this to y'all earlier, because it's kind of a part of the battlefield, but really not. We got to see that the Ukrainians took down their first heads through electronic warfare. These are the first ever, and they actually were able to take down a good amount of them overnight with electronic warfare systems. Usually they have to shoot these things down with ground fire, some kind of a missile or some kind of an anti-aircraft gun. But for the first time ever, they down these things through electronic warfare means, and that means that it's going to be a lot cheaper for these things to be taken down and a lot easier for the Ukrainians to probably combat them. But still, love to see them. I love to see that they were able to take them down. And great to know that the Ukrainians are constantly trying to innovate to make the war cheaper and more efficient on their end. Moving on from that bit of news and towards Donetsk, we also got to see the destruction of some Russian equipment, or as they call it, Ruski equipment. Check it out. I'm going to have to be muting that, but that sounds like brand new music to me. And look at that. They're telling us about it. Oh, then they're getting it. And yes, David, there are smaller mortars. I believe there is a 40mm knee mortar out there somewhere. Do not fire that thing on your knee, by the way. You will break your knee. But there is a 40mm knee mortar out there. And I think there's even... I don't think there's any others smaller than a 40mm. Usually those are getting replaced these days with grenade launchers, because grenade launchers fire 40mm rounds. So, interesting to know. But there are things that are slightly smaller. But 60mm these days are really as small as they get. But look at the 59th doing its work for the Imperium of Man. The Emperor protects, and he really does. I mean, I'm not kidding y'all. The Emperor really does protect. You think those NIDs are not making it through just because of some magic from Gilliman? No, it's the Emperor. But anyways, that's the end of the clip right there. Great to see that they were able to knock out 2 of those little electronic warfare systems. And absolutely beautiful. I feel like breaking out into a song. But anyways, moving on from the area of Donetsk and beyond that part of the front line and down towards Novomikhailivka, things have been getting a little spicy down here. And I would have to say, quite spicy indeed. Starting off with our first clip, we got to see Russian forces getting hit by the 79th Air Mobile Brigade. Kind of like an airborne brigade, but apparently very mobile. That's a new song. But we can see a decent amount of BMPs already knocked out. See them hitting a APC in the middle of it. We can also see another knocked out tank further down that is also getting hit by FPV drones, or really the BMP alongside it. Ooh, and that thing's getting hot and spicy. We see them dropping a drone bomb onto this tank as well, obliterating it and causing a hellfire on the street. Someone call up the fire department. And that's the end of that little clip right there. But still, love to see it. I love to see the 79th Air Mobile Brigade doing the Lord's work. Moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see a BMP-3 get hit by a bomblet down here and get beat around a little bit. Check it out. Whoa. And we can see them dropping the bomb. There we go. And right on top. There goes the infantry. They're all getting off. And ooh, what a hit. And that's the end of the clip right there. But it's beautiful to see that they were able to knock themselves out a whole BMP-3. Pretty decent little system right there. I mean, you know, it's probably one of the best infantry fighting vehicles out there in reality. The only thing that would really give it a run for its money and beat it is a Bradley, but still, love to see it. But anyways, moving on from that into our next clip, we also got to see a Ukrainian drone hitting more Russian forces a little bit further down. There are a decent amount of new songs. I'm glad that some people are picking up that new songs need to be had. But sadly, we still can't play them because they're all copyrighted. But oh my lord. Wow. Hit the whole group. Here it comes. Here it comes. Any second now. We'll see it coming in. Oh my goodness. Chunks of flying. Yeah, I don't think they had a great day with that one. Something bit me. And with that, that's the end of the clip. But y'all know what I'm about to say. I'm happy to see it. Happy to see that the Ukrainians were able to knock out another group of Russians because, like Zoink Scoop, I think it got blown up. Reggie, no more reinforcements. But anyways, moving on from that clip and over to really our last clip on the southern front before I bring y'all down to Mariupol again for a minute. We got to see the 63rd Brigade conducting a very rare attack near the area of Zaibazhanya. That's new. But here's the video. And we can see them hitting the Russians. And Barry Woodward is absolutely right. Almost any audio that isn't the raw audio of the video I consider to be copyrighted, so we just end up muting it. I'm sorry for that, y'all, but it's a part of my policy of having an ad-free, sponsor-free stream. If I play copyrighted music, which I could do, I could get in trouble with a copyright holder in several ways. One, the video could possibly be copyright striked, which every copyright holder has a legal right to do. Or this video could end up getting completely restricted, where y'all are never able to watch it again. Or another option is that they could content ID this thing, which is the general reality of breaching a copyright, and then YouTube, without consulting me, it's just against my will, they run ads on this thing. I don't make a cent off of them, but the ads still exist, and then that starts to really aggravate me, because then there are ads running. It's just that we don't get any benefit from them. They're just there. But I hope that does address that well, why we mute everything. So if you do enjoy the channel and you want to support the thing and help it to keep running, there is always the option. There is always the option of supporting through the super chats. You may have seen some come through tonight. They help the channel to keep running. But that is entirely up to you if you want to support the channel or not. It is a completely optional thing. But moving on from that and down into Mariupol, we got to see that apparently the Russians are actually putting some people on trial for the horrible conditions that have been seen in the city of Mariupol. According to what we got off of Reddit, so take it for what it is, Russian commanders face prosecution for starving Mariupol in first-of-its-kind case. I don't think this is going to go anywhere. I think this will most likely be a show trial and just done to make it look like the Russians care on a propaganda side of things. But the fact of a commander of the Russians holding a commander accountable for something like that probably will not happen. It's never happened really in history before, either in the Soviet Union or in the Russian Federation, and I'm highly doubting it's going to start happening now at this point in the war. But nevertheless, it is something to note that the Russians are still trying on their propaganda initiative to look like humanitarians. And many Ukrainians know the reality, really all Ukrainians know the reality of what the Russians really are, and are always scared that if the Ukrainians are not able to hold the line or push the Russians back out, they may advance forward. And a lot of people have been talking a little bit, because many of y'all may know that the Washington Post put out a little article today saying that the Department of Defense is trying to find a workaround for support to Ukraine, but they're not expecting the Ukrainians to take any ground over the entirety of this year at all. No ground whatsoever. And they're planning on the front lines to remain completely stagnant over this year. That's led to a lot of people having a question as to whether the Russians will gain ground this year, considering that the Department of Defense is once again in their genius saying that the Ukrainians will not be able to do the impossible, which I think they've done about 1,000,000 times. Nevertheless, most of y'all say no. Pretty much, like, the 2 out of every 3 of y'all say no. Some people say yes, and then another group of people say maybe. But it doesn't really seem like a lot of people are into the strong and fervent belief that the Russians will make any ground, which I'm happy to see, because I honestly don't think they will make ground. And so, with that, I hope that does address that well. And also, I can still see questions coming in about Enforcer Matt. Where is Enforcer Matt? And let's see. Hang on, let me get that person. Some people are asking where he is, and I'm gonna be honest, I'm so sorry. I'm not, it's been almost 2 weeks now, and I'm just gonna explain it frankly as it is. Stress has been very high behind the scenes for both of us. Unlike me, Matthew has the option to be able to walk away from the stream if the stress got too high. He's got an option to walk away from the entire channel if the stress gets too high, because we're living 2 entirely separate lives at the exact same time. I'm spending 60 hours a week on this, and I'm spending another 60 hours a week on law school. Matthew was doing something very similar. He decided 2 weeks ago that the stress was pretty high, and y'all kind of saw that boil over a little bit on stream, and if, and some people were going, what, that had actually, that the stress had been so high that things were, fairly, heated off stream too. Like, we both were at our wits, we both still really are at our wits end. Well, really I am. He's not anymore, because he's got a lot of free time now. But, after that night, I asked him, because, we've never done anything like that on air at all, either of us. I was like, are you all right? Is the stress getting to you? And we had a discussion. He said the stress really is getting to him. He doesn't think he could do it anymore, because he did it all last semester and hardly got through it. He doesn't think he could do it again. So he said, I think I'm just going to step away and focus on law school. And I said, all right, that's fine with me. I said, I'll figure out a way to manage, and I'll figure out a way to keep this thing running. And so I am. I got to thank everyone who's appreciated that and respects the channel and is continuing to support it and watch and subscribe. And I've got to thank everyone who reminds me each and every day that where is Enforcer Matt when that's been talked about for 2 weeks now, and also everyone who says the channel is not as good without Enforcer Matt, because guess what? I can't really control what Matthew does and doesn't want to do, and so telling me that you want Enforcer Matt back doesn't really do anything for me but add to the stress. So thank you for that. But I hope that does address that well. And with that, it is now time for us to move on to Kyiv to cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 703 of the war. And so, without further ado, here is the speech.
I wish you good health, dear.
And we ain't listening to that in English. Like, no. We're listening to that in Ukrainian. Here we go.
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці, українки. Завершуємо цей день, цей тиждень. Вже час підбивати перші підсумки цього січня для України, для наших відносин з партнерами. Попри різні виклики, багато складнощів, Україні вдалося зберегти міжнародну увагу до нашої української битви за незалежність. Вдалося додати нашій державі ще більше стійкості, саме того, що є головним аргументом у міжнародній комунікації. Те, на що ви здатні, те, що ви здатні витримати, те, через що ви здатні пройти. Світ звертає увагу на стійких та сміливих. Перше. Маємо за цей місяць підписану амбітну безпекову угоду з Великою Британією. Це тепер фактично базовий орієнтир. Є на що рівнятись у роботі з іншими партнерами. І тривають такі перемовини про нові безпекові угоди. І не лише з державами в Європі. Щодо двосторонніх документів на виконання безпекової декларації Групи 7. І впевнений, вже скоро нові результати щодо безпекових гарантій для України. Вдячний усім нашим партнерам, які допомагають. Друге, фактично у цьому місяці наші команди України та Польщі перезавантажили відносини. І маємо хороше розуміння одне одного, маємо чіткі орієнтири, що важливо для наших суспільств, для наших безпекових інтересів. І, до речі, Польща приєдналась до безпекової декларації Групи 7. Загалом вже 32 країни працюють з нами на цьому напрямку. Третє. Є хороший результат у відносинах з Євросоюзом. Почалася змістовна підготовка до початку перемовин, процес скринінгу українського законодавства. Це офіційна оцінка українських правових актів на відповідність праву Євросоюзу. Вже є розуміння графіку зустрічей, усіх наступних необхідних кроків, і важливо, щоб урядова команда України була достатньо мобілізована для цієї роботи. Україна зацікавлена в максимальних результатах у відносинах з Європою саме цього року, які тільки можливі. Четверте. Я вдячний Швейцарії за дуже хороші, продуктивні перемовини під час візиту, а також за ефективну організацію зустрічі радників щодо формули миру. Є домовленість і щодо організації першого саміту миру на рівні лідерів у Швейцарії. Тривають дуже активні контакти щодо цього. Дійсно, сильна історія. Готуємо її. П'яте. Оборонні пакети для України. Ми маємо за місяць непогану динаміку. Звичайно, потребуємо більшого, щоб досягти контролю у небі і більше можливостей на землі, передусім артилерійських. Але як би нам не було складно, ми маємо постачання і артилерії, і ракет, боєприпасів для ППО. Я дякую кожній країні, яка підтримує наших воїнів, захист українських життів. Вже сотні російських ракет і дронів збиті за цей місяць. І продовжуємо роботу з партнерами. Чекаємо на відповідне рішення Сполучених Штатів Америки. Це критично важливо. Я дякую кожній країні, яка анонсувала нові пакети підтримки на нещодавній зустрічі у форматі Рамштайн, а це 9 пакетів підтримки, зокрема, деякі дефіцитні речі для нашої оборони. Вже готуємо на лютий ще більше домовленостей з партнерами. Окремо я хочу відзначити результати комунікації з партнерами щодо російських активів. За цей місяць ми наблизились до рішення, якого ми потребуємо, яке буде справедливим. Усі російські активи самої держави терориста та пов'язаних з нею осіб, які є в різних юрисдикціях та заморожені, мають працювати для захисту від російської ж агресії. Вони мають бути конфісковані, і ми робимо все, щоб це рішення було змістовно підготовлено найближчим часом. Я дякую кожному і кожній, хто допомагає нам просувати цей механізм відновлення справедливості. І, звичайно, санкції. Потрібен новий санкційний пакет Євросоюзу, і ми готуємо його. А також готуємо нові кроки, щоб обмежити російську здатність обходити санкції. Кожен прояв тиску на Росію – це наближення миру. Кожен прояв допомоги Україні – це захист життя. Я вдячний усім, хто з Україною. Дякую усім, хто б'ється, працює заради нашої держави, нашої незалежності, наших людей. Слава Україні!
And Rom Slava. And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 703 of the news, the war in Ukraine. And that's going to be moving us on into the second segment of the stream, where I get to talk to all of y'all for about the next 50 minutes or so, hopefully. Of course, first, I have to address the super chats, and then we'll be getting into the live chats. Of course, I also have to say this as well. If you do enjoy the channel and you want to get directly involved in helping the channel to keep on rolling, you can hit the like button, you can subscribe, or you can support the channel through Super Chat or through Patreon. I have always said that I would never directly plug that, but got to be honest, things have been looking a little bit difficult behind the scenes, and I'm trying not to go into that a lot on air, but the support from viewers is always greatly appreciated, and we would love to see folks continue to help the channel to keep running. But beyond that, it is time for us to get into the Super Chats. And our first one of the segment is from Walter A. Lakota Jr., the OG Ellison Bosun. And of course, he said, "Aloha, the Enforcer, Enforcer Matt, and LSA from OG Ellison Bosun. Canister Shop helped develop a new type of cannon warfare known as linear warfare, which made a mass formations an old tactic. It was first used in 1823 in St. Petersburg." And let's type in linear warfare. Let me see if I can get that in here. Let's see here. Let's see here. I sadly can't find anything about that. And let's see here. It looks like line. It says line formation, but from what I understand, line formation tactics, or more so doctrine, was a thing since the times of Gustavus Adolphus, nearer to the later end of the pike and shot era. But that's from what I understand. And so, let's see, linear warfare, and I still can't find anything about that specific style of fighting. I hate to say that, Walter, because I would love to look into that. But still, it is a very interesting thing. Canister shot, grape shot, and all those kinds of different forms of shot, because it was brutal if anyone ever went up against cannons that were firing that kind of stuff. Like, for example, one of the best historic instances of something like that being used was at the Battle of Antietam in 1862, in the Battle of the Cornfield, which was like a smaller battle in the general Battle of Antietam. And in that battle, a cannon battery of the Union Army just started firing straight through this cornfield into the Confederate infantry that was inside of it, and they ended up getting obliterated. I mean, just over and over and over. It was brutal, what was happening to the Confederate soldiers in that cornfield. And at the end of it all, the Ukrainians, the Union ended up winning that small battle just through raw use of canister shot throughout the entirety of it. But what's actually interesting, y'all, about the U.S. Civil War is that everyone in Europe looked at the war and said that the U.S., both the Confederacy and the Union, were using very backwards and archaic forms of battle that at this point in Europe had completely disappeared. But one thing came out of the Civil War, the U.S. Civil War, that had never been really seen in wars before, in the ways that they were seen in the U.S. Civil War. which was trench warfare. So if anyone ever asks you, where is the birthplace of trench warfare? It's not World War I, oddly enough. It's actually the U.S. Civil War, specifically the Battle of Vicksburg and also the Battle of Richmond, or more so, the Siege of Petersburg. Those were the two places where trench warfare actually saw its first emergence and was wild to see, because if you look at the trench works from back then, and let me see if I can actually find y'all a picture or a painting, trenches in the Civil War. I'll show y'all something wild here, and let me see here. Trenches in the U.S. Civil War. I gotta find them. I've gotta find them. Come on, YouTube, come on. And here we go. So, I believe this would be a picture of a Confederate trench work, but nevertheless, it is an actual trench work. You can see the very early or prototypical kind of trench emplacements. This is also another picture from the U.S. Civil War here showing a trench work. And when you look at that, it's not that hard to see that the trenches of World War I, at least for the Allies or the Entente, were very heavily based off of the trench works of the U.S. Civil War that was fought nearly 50 years before World War I would even see its first shot fired. So pretty interesting to look at. And Richard Philpott, you're kind of correct. The Civil War is kind of a bit of a prelude in a way to World War I, but really what set off World War I was the Italian unification, the German unification, and also the Franco-Prussian War of 1877. The Franco-Prussian War really was the biggest catalyst to the First World War than anything else, because the bitter defeat of France in the loss of Alsace-Lorraine to the Germans was something that made the French hellishly bitter against the Germans and really ensured that whenever a chance would arise, the French would try and go to war with the Germans. But then also, there was the rise of these massive alliances, the Triple Alliance and the Triple Entente, that were meant in a way to ensure that the Congress of Vienna in 1815 was upheld and to also try and maintain the balance of power in Europe. But in the end, it balanced the powers so well in Europe, you ended up with this 4-year meat grinder because both sides were so well pitted against each other, at least for that time. But of course, the Triple Alliance would win. Really, the best reason to explain why they won is because of the British. And I know that the British are going to be like, yeah, baby, because a lot of people are like, oh, it's the Americans with their fresh manpower in 1917, 1918 that really ended up beating the Germans. The Germans were already beat at that point. The Americans arriving was really a question of, were the Germans going to surrender in about a year from then, or were they going to surrender in about a year and a half or 2 years from then? Because honestly, the Germans were already falling apart from the inside about the time that the U.S. actually entered the war. The British, with the Royal Navy, had been able to blockade the Germans so effectively over those 4 years that they practically starved them to death. By the end of the war, there was almost no real food to be had in Germany, and on top of that, they were also able to deprive the Germans of vital war materials from other nations abroad and overseas. So really, it was the Royal Navy, in a way, that ended up really blistering the Germans and really the reason why they lost the First World War. And what's even crazier about that is that there was really only one major naval engagement in the entirety of World War I, and the Germans technically ended up winning it a little bit. But because they were so scared of the British fleet after the Battle of Jutland, the German High Fleet just remained, I believe, in Wilhelmshaven and Bremerhaven until the end of the war, and then finally, at the end of the war, when the Treaty of Versailles was signed, the Germans literally handed over their entire navy, and the entire thing was sunk, I believe, at Scapa Flow. And let's see, where the hell is Scapa Flow? Oh my god, I can't find Scapa Flow. Usually I would know exactly where that is. But it was all sunk at Scapa Flow, and then in World War II, well, I think a little bit before World War II, the British refloated the entire fleet and then sent them off for scrapping. So that way they would be able to have more materials and raw resources for the war effort to come. But anyways, small little rabbit hole there. But I hope that was interesting to y'all. And let's see, with that, I hope that did address that quite well, at least about a little bit about trench warfare and cannon warfare and stuff like that. But thank you so much once again for the massive amount of support, Walter, and helping this channel to keep on running. You are the OG LSM bosun and have been able to keep this thing running for so long. You're usually our Hawaii fun facts guy. You're the guy I look to for Hawaii fun facts, but you're also the fella that gives us fun facts overall. And I gotta say, that is a fun one. I love facts like that. And also, I thank you so much once again for the support and helping the channel to keep running. I never try and harp on this much on air because I hate to make it seem like the channel must make, really, like, to not try and mince words, it must make money to run. But the reality is that the channel must get super chats to be able to run. I don't like saying that because I've seen some people complain in the past that it sounds like the channel's being hostage, and I'm telling people if they don't support, the channel can't run. And that's not really the way it's supposed to be meant, but at the same time, that is the inevitable truth. The channel can't run for free. I don't live in a communist utopia. There is rent that I have to pay. There are bills that I, of course, have to pay. And all of that, of course, costs money. And so to be able to do this, I have to be able to do it as a living. Otherwise, if I can't do it as a living, I can't do it at all, and I have to go do something else. And so I got to thank you greatly, Walter, for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because viewers like you who support this channel help me to be able to keep the thing alive. And I hate having to really say it the way it is about Super Chat support, because I feel like then at that point, it almost makes people feel like they're compelled to support the channel. But at the same time, I thank you greatly. And of course, without support like yours, the channel would not be able to keep running. Another thing is that, I always go on to these long thanks, which people always say they're tired of. But then when I do not go on to the long thanks, it seems like there is not a lot of support that comes in for the channel. So, that's something that I also have to weigh in as well. But nevertheless, thank you so much once again for support, Walter. I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one, which is a 30 from Marion Deemer. And Marion Deemer said, Rum Slava, and Rum Slava. And thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep running, because folks like you make it possible, Marion. You've been here for an incredibly long while, a very long while, as a matter of fact, and have constantly been supporting this channel to help it to keep running, and I thank you for that, because if it wasn't for folks like you who were always helping this channel to keep running, I wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. Everyone always looks towards the Sundays and always, looks forward to supporting the fundraisers, which is absolutely incredible. But a very small part of the Lee Spring Army actually focuses on supporting the channel and helping to keep running. And so thank you so much, Marion, for being one of those folks that is focusing on the rear end side of things that helps me to make this channel possible. And so thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to a next one, which is from Walter A. Lakota again. Hey! And thank you so much for the support, Walter A. Lakota. He threw in a $20 super chat. And he said, me again, Ukrainian fact. Ukrainians place the wedding ring on the right ring finger, as is customary in Eastern Orthodox Church. And that is very interesting, and I got to thank you for that and sharing that with me. I did not know that, and I don't honestly know. Let's see. On the right ring finger, I think it's like that here in my family. I don't know. But I'll have to look into that a little bit and figure out where they wear their rings, because I don't really look into that much. Of course, I don't wear a ring. I'm not married, but that is still interesting to know, and thank you for sharing that with me, Walter A. Lakota, because that is certainly something I did not know. I think my mom and dad may actually wear their rings on their right hands, but I'll have to check because I'm not exactly sure on that right now. But with that, I hope that does address that well, and thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep running. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is a 20 from that mom, and call you family. And thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And that mom said, you're doing great, Enforcer. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. It's amazing that you can run this stream alone while doing law school. I'm impressed. Keep it up. Oh, and to those in the chat, call you family. And call you family, dagnabbit. Call them, dang it. And thank you so much for saying the channel's been doing great. I got to thank everyone who has been with the channel, continues to be with the channel, and enjoys it a great deal, because it is a lot to run the thing alone. And it makes me very happy to know that although I'm shouldering a lot more burden and effort every night to try and keep this thing running, people are still here and enjoying it. And not only that, continuing to support it to make it possible. Like you, that mom, helping the channel to run tonight. And I got to thank you for that. And it's something that's crazy to me because for a long time I actually thought that the channel would never be possible with just one person running it. But then I think 1 or 2 times Matthew decided to just take nights off from the stream and, you know, just ended up not being on. So I had to run them on my own because, you know, back then, also to explain that, back then when that was happening, that was stress overload, and you know, I just try and weather through it. And he was like, I can't do it, I can't get on air. So I was like, oh, that's fine. You know, if you have to take a night off, take a night off. I'll just get on air and run it alone. And so I think I did that like 3 times before he actually ended up deciding just to move on from the channel. And then that's when I figured out, okay, it actually is possible to be run on its as a one-man band. It's just that it's going to be pretty freaking difficult to be able to pull that off. And I got to thank you for appreciating that, because I always talk about how stressful it is and how tiresome everything is, but I never really get to explain or show a lot of why it is very stressful and very tiresome and very involved, you know, because you know, everyone looks at YouTube and they go, oh, you know, that's some guy who works literally like 2 hours a day or less, and you know, just gets off. But there honestly is a lot of work that goes on before the stream even happens to make this thing possible, especially on my end, because unlike other YouTubers who do half-ass it in this community, I don't, and I always like to make sure that we have the news ready before the stream. That's why we have our own custom-made map and everything else, and so I got to thank you for appreciating that, and I got to thank you for supporting the channel and helping this thing to keep running, because folks who support the channel really do make this thing possible. I try and make y'all feel as special as y'all possibly can with my thanks, because y'all truly are special. There's not really a lot of people who support the channel, and out of the people who do, y'all are the ones who make it possible. I can't really, you know, lie about that, because I would be lying if I said support did or did not matter. Support actually greatly matters to the longevity of this channel and its ability to continue to survive, much like it is with really any other channel. That's why you'll see other channels that only run ads or have sponsors, when they get hit by YouTube's AdSense, they sit there and say something, you know, they'll make a video saying, oh my god, everyone, they hit me and I'm not making any money, because everyone does this as a job, and it's very important to have continued support to be able to do this. And so I got to thank you so much once again for the massive support, that mom, and helping this channel to keep running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, I wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And so thank you so much once again. And we are on to the next one, which is a $20 super chat from Ari Sowini. And hey, Kiwi Wife and Finn. And I love to see it. Welcome on board, Kiwi Wife and Finn. And thank you so much for the support. You didn't throw in a comment, but the support does mean a lot and helps me to be able to keep this channel running. If it wasn't for folks like you, I wouldn't be able to keep this thing running and on air, Ari Sweeney. And I got to thank you, Kiwi Wife and the Finn, for making this thing possible, because if it wasn't for y'all, I wouldn't be able to be here on air talking right now. And so, thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel keep on running, and I hope I was able to address that the best I could. And so with that, we are on to the next one, which is a $10 super chat from Barry Woodward. And Barry Woodward said, blood, money, soul, and spirit we have invested in the LSA. Please post a link to communicate with our brother Matt. It is needed and therapeutic, and long live the LSA. And thank you so much for the support, Barry Woodward. And thank you for helping this channel to keep on running. And we have put in blood, money, soul, and spirit into this channel. I know I certainly have. And one thing that was actually crazy is that last year when I did my tax stuff, I literally missed being able to get a little bit more than the standard deduction, because I added up all of the support that I had given to fundraisers over the 2022 calendar year, not the 2023 year, because the taxes for that aren't due until April 15th. But still, over 2022, what was crazy is that I had put something like $11,000 into fundraisers that was run on this channel over that time, which was a lot more than I thought it would be, and I think it's something similar this year. So I know that I've certainly put a decent amount of money, not really a lot of blood, me personally. I haven't put a lot of blood into it, but I have put soul and spirit, a lot of that into the channel as well, and I got to thank you so much for giving a huge shout out to the entire LSA, who's also done amazing things like that as well. And I would post a link to communicate with Enforcer Matt, but that was a lot of the background stress that he dealt with that I didn't really have to deal with. And before he left, is that there are a lot of people who reach out to us on a daily basis, and we always love to respond to folks and talk to them when they reach out, but at the same time, it adds a lot of stress because some people, I guess, don't ever factor in that we have entire lives outside of YouTube, and we're doing two entirely different things. So we might not be able to get back to people for a day, maybe 2 days, and then they get angry, and then they say, "Why the hell are you ignoring me? What the hell's wrong with you?" And then we'd be like, "We're not, we're just busy." And then, you know, they get offended. And that was actually a lot of stress as well, because, you know, we know that some of y'all are, really all of y'all are incredibly kind and compassionate. But, you know, because of some people who go mental, we then have to be fearful that anyone can go mental and just go off on us because we didn't get back to them in like 5 minutes and act like we were crushing on them. So, you know, that's a bit of a thing that was really stressful. And I got to tell y'all, I'm not even kidding. Matthew has actually been a lot happier. And I don't mean to say this like, you know, like dissing on the stream or anything, but Matthew's actually been a lot happier since he has started to just focus on law school only. It is a great burden and a stressor to run this stream. Very, very strenuous on the mind. And he's actually been doing great. I mean, like, he went from being absolutely like strung out and extremely stressed like I am to now he's joking and laughing and stuff and everything in the background, and he's doing great. So you know, that's something that I was like, damn, I was like, he really was being stressed out by this. And I know I'm like that too, because, you know, hell, I mean, like, I could, like, sometimes behind the scenes, I'll be honest, some days I'm so tired that I have a very short fuse, because, like, I wake up, like, hell, I think it was just yesterday, I wake up at 6 in the morning, and I get to law school. I mean, I wake up at 6 in the morning, I'm out of the door at like 6:20, and what, the stream ended? What the hell's going on? Anyways, so I'll get up at 6 in the morning, get to school by like 6:15, 6:30 or so. Then you just hang out there until the first class starts. And then you sit through those classes. Then you just sit through all the time in between trying to read books and catch up on what's going on in law school. And then you get back in the car, you drive home, and by the time I get home, I have about 30 minutes to eat, and then I have to start working on this, and then I work until about 12 o'clock at night. And so that right there, I mean, my entire day is consumed. Like, there is no free time most days in my week, and there wasn't really a lot of free time in Matthew's days either. Although he did admittedly have more than me. He'd have like 2 hours maybe of free time per day. I had none. I still have none. And that is a big thing that really stresses you out, because you have time to do nothing. Like, my car is in dire straits at the moment. I mean, you know, the thing, like, I took it in for servicing. They're like, everything's messed up on it. And so I have literally had no time from when they told me that, and I got it out of the shop, and to now, which has been about 3 weeks, to even try and get it back into the shop, because everything is just that busy. And that is what is just massively stressful about the stream. And so Matthew, and also some people were like, well, he could have said goodbye. I mean, if y'all knew the stress that we were both, that I'm under and he was under, like, he was just like, that's it. Like, he was literally, that's it. I can't do it anymore. I can't. I give up. That was pretty much how it was. So I hope that kind of does address that well. And I hate to give y'all like the freaking drama background like daily at this point, because, you know, folks are always asking about Enforcer Matt, and I'm trying to be as honest with y'all as possible about how everything went behind the scenes, because, you know, folks don't know, because none of y'all are here. And then there are people who just really aggravate me. Some people have been around for a while and they go, oh, they got in a disagreement and he got fired. No, that's not what happened. We got into a disagreement, yes, but then because of that disagreement, the next day afterwards, I was like, what is going on. And then he was like, I'm stressed out. I can't do it anymore. I've got to focus on law school. And I was like, well, you sure? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, all right. So with that, I hope that does address that well. But nevertheless, long live the Lee Spring Army. And thank you so much once again for support, Barry Woodward, in helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is a $13.37 super chat from Jack Ray. And thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, Jack. And of course, long live the Lee Spring Army. And thank you once again for helping this channel to keep on rolling. If it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is a $10 super chat from Scott Kemp. And Hoagie, I'm going to say this very politely, because I will be honest, when people say stuff like that, my temper shoots up through the roof, and I try and keep as professional as possible. There is nothing more to that story. I'm literally being as transparent as I possibly can be with you, and I have seen you around here for a while, so that's why I'm not immediately coming down on you. But if I see something like that again, and I do not mean to, this is not a threat, I'm going to say this is just a mere warning. If I see something like that again in the chat, you will be instantly banned. I've given you the entire story from front to finish, trying to be as honest and transparent with you all as possible. If you do not believe it, you can leave. That's the simplest way I can get it out to you. But moving on from that, we got a $10 super chat from Scott Kemp. And he said, Enforcer, memorize commercial outlines for the courses. That and a quick brain should get you through. And thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Folks like you have made this channel possible. And I got to thank you so much once again for helping this thing to keep possible. And I wish that I would be able to memorize like commercial outlines, but sadly some of these classes try and cover specific things, and I think it's to make sure that they can't you know, have like a commercial outline really cover the whole class. But I am going to look into that though, and I've certainly been trying to this semester, and I've been taking some hellish notes. I mean, most of the notes that I have, well, the notes I have in 2 classes are now like 20 something pages long, and it's like 20 pages long, and it's like 12-point Times New Roman font. So, you know, like huge amounts of notes, and hopefully that'll help me out this semester, because last semester it was really like impossible for me to even take notes. I was like burnt out most days. But this semester I'm trying my damnedest to get down as much notes as possible, and hopefully that'll help. But thank you for this recommendation, Scott, because folks like you do help to make this channel possible, and if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to be here right now. And so thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on running, Scott, and I hope that does address that well. And moving on from that, and into our next one, we have a 150 Norwegian kroner super chat from Siri. And Siri said, alike mid the greatest triumphs and dark tragedies of life we walk alone. On the divine heights of human attributes, eulogized and worshipped as a hero or saint. We stand alone. E.C. Stanton. And thank you so much for the support, Siri. And that is a very interesting little quote right there. I have not heard that one before. And I got to thank you so much once again for the support, helping this channel to keep on running, and throwing in a very interesting quote. You're kind of becoming the quote person on this channel, and I like that. Keep it up, and continue to share really good quotes with us here going on into the future. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is a $15 super chat from Bob Anon. And he said, are you familiar with General John Minash and the first use of combined arms in Le Hamel? Great job running the stream. Do finish the law degree. It's worth even if it takes longer to finish. And thank you so much for the support and helping the channel to keep running. And I am sadly not familiar with General John Minash. Let me go pull him up. John Minash. And what do we have on him? He is an Australian civil engineer, actually. And I'm guessing that, yeah, he was involved in World War I. It's like, I was like, well, what do you know? And let's see, which battle would that have been? Let's see, the Battle of Amiens. Let's see here. I wouldn't doubt that this guy was the first general to conduct combined arms warfare, because World War I really was the time where we started to see combined arms warfare. And I would have to say, I'm going to have to look into that and read into that a little bit more, but sadly, I don't really know a lot about Australian military history beyond the Anzacs in World War I, which was the Australians and New Zealanders. But beyond that, thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who help to make this thing possible. And thank you so much for enjoying the stream and finding it worthwhile to support, because folks like you who do support the channel make it possible for me to be on air and to try and continue to run this thing as a one-man band working about 60 hours a week. And so thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well, Bob and on. And we are on to the next one, which is a £5 super chat from Dean London, one of our British viewers. And Dean said, have a few quid towards the Get Some Rest fund. You do a great job and love the channel, but we all need some rest. And LSA. And thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you so much for putting some quid towards the rest fund. I do love some rest, and sadly, there's just not enough of it. But I will be trying to get some more, hopefully here and there. And of course, with your continued support, hopefully I will be able to have less, because I would much rather be able to run this channel and get less rest than not be able to have the channel exist and have to do something else and probably get a little bit more rest. But still, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And let's see. Moving on into the next one, we have a $5 super chat from Simon Condon, who said, Slava Ukraini and the Lee Spring Army, love the show and miss Matt. Grab one from the chat. And thank you so much for the support, Simon, and helping this channel to keep on running. It is folks like you who help to make this thing possible. And I got to thank you so much for supporting this channel and helping us to keep this thing running, because folks like you help to make me make this show possible. If it wasn't for folks like you, I wouldn't be able to keep this thing rolling. So thank you so much for that, and thank you for helping this channel to keep on running. And also, everyone misses Matt. I'm sure everyone does, but at this point, I've just got to keep the thing rolling, and, you know, hopefully people just enjoy me running this thing on my own. But still, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well, and I will try and grab one from the chat. And this one goes to, let's see here, looking through, and let's see. And yes, I'm gonna maybe hopefully remove Enforcer Matt from the Nightbot in the future. Let's see. And also, Jorn Schneider said, what happened to the Russian tube attack? They say they were heroes and won the war. From what we know, they were able to make the small little enclave inside of Avdiivka, but beyond that, they haven't really been able to use that much farther than where they made it there. So it appears that the pipes didn't go further, or the Ukrainians stopped them from going through the pipes further. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, and thank you so much once again for the support and sponsoring that live chat. And of course, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die. And moving on from that, we got a $2 super chat from CK Bold, asking for the number one, the usual. And he said, take a live chat question. And I will, CK Bold. We've got to grab a live chat question. And so let's see, do we have one? Let's see here. Let's see, let's see, Jorn Schneider's questions. Sadly, I'm not really seeing a lot of them. Let's see. Let's see here. I'm looking around, trying to find, let's see. And I guess this is the best one I could take, which is from Vance Hicks. And Vance Hicks said, I'm not young. I see a bigger picture. As much as I like this place, the dad in me says, close it down if this YouTube thing is hindering y'all's future, which is so bright, both of you. And thank you so much for that, Vance. But sadly, I really can't, because while it's also a big thing as far as a public service to Ukraine and everything, the support that I receive nightly helps me to be able to do things that I would not be able to do, like go to law school. Of course, you know, the law school fund is something that I haven't really brought up a lot lately, but the support that y'all give, hopefully, will be able to help me to pay off the incredibly massive cost of law school, which is a really big concern as to what's going to happen with that. It's incredibly expensive. It costs unbelievable amount every semester. And so running this channel and being able to get supported is a way that hopefully I'll be able to support myself to get through law school and be able to get out of it just fine. Because otherwise, I might be in a little bit of trouble, kind of like some folks at law school are already kind of starting to talk about. So that's another big reason why the channel kind of has to keep running, Vance, is because it is my job. And through me being able to save up and, not just get silly stuff, I'm able to make sure that by the time the end of law school comes around, I will hopefully have enough saved up that I can pay off most of it and not have to worry about crushing interest rates on these exorbitantly massive loans that I've had to take out to get through law school. So that's kind of another part of it. And I would stop for that reason as well, just to focus on school, but at the same time, that is a little tough to do when considering that factor. And of course, that's not the only one, because I know someone out there is about to take that and twist it. Y'all who know who that is and go, oh, look, he's only doing it for, the money for law school. No, because there was no money in this originally, unlike other people, unlike really everyone who started doing this months later after we started doing it in February, and everyone else hopped in June and July after they figured out they could make a great deal of money doing this. This channel ran entirely for free for about 3 weeks because it was never monetized. It wasn't even a big enough channel in the first 5 days of the war to even be eligible for monetization. I did it because I cared. And then it turned out that people enjoyed the channel enough that it turned into a news channel rather than me just trying to tell a friend I had in Ukraine where the Russians were. It turned into a news channel, and then I said, wow, this can be a blessing. Through viewer support, I can help to keep this thing running, and not only that, hopefully be able to pay off the massive cost of law school. And so that is another part of it. But still, thank you so much for the suggestion, Vance, and thank you for the concern. And I hope that does address that the best I can, because that is also another concern of the channel, and that's why I also thank everyone greatly for supporting the channel and helping me to keep it running, because it's a big concern of mine to be able to keep going towards the future. And when I say, because a lot of y'all are like, man, law school is expensive, but and if you're saving up for that, obviously you could run the channel for long. Actually, funnily enough, it probably would not be able to run that long without support. If the support completely stopped, or it dropped down to a very low number, like sometimes it looks like it's almost about to drop down to that, to those low numbers sometimes here and there every night, and then it seems as though that is starting to become a lot more of the average, that it's getting a little bit lower and lower. And then I sit there and go, if it gets that low, considering YouTube takes 30% of it, and considering that the federal government will end up taking about 40 to 50% of it, because, self-employment tax and all that stuff, then I'm left with a certain number every single month. And then I calculate out of that certain number every month, how much of that will have to go back towards paying loans, how much of that needs to go towards paying for basic utilities. And sometimes over these past 4 months, that number has actually been so low that it ends up that I'm actually not making enough, and I'm actually having to spend money I'm not making. So that's something that has been a little bit of concern, and we always, Matthew and me used to hint at that a little bit, but I don't want to sound like I'm begging, and I don't want to make it sound like it's y'all's issue to support this channel or not, but at the same time, kind of want to be honest with y'all about all of the pressures that go into running this channel, and why that is a bit of an issue. So with that, hope that does address that well, and thank you so much once again, CK Ball, for sponsoring that live chat, so that way I could go into that massively long explanation of why I have to run the channel a certain way. But still, thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one. And the next one is a $50 super chat from Trister1. Hey! And thank you so much for the massive support, Trister1, and helping the channel to keep on rolling. It is folks like you who help to make this thing possible, for me to keep the lights on, for me to be able to keep going to law school, and to keep working into the ground. You're helping the Lee Spring Army to stay alive, because the Lee Spring Army never dies. And so thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on rolling. And with that, we are in to the next one, which is a 20 Swedish kroner super chat from Quantum Fighter. And he said, for the signing of the HPL reference, well, for the singing in the HPL reference. And thank you so much for that support and helping this channel to keep on running. Folks like you make it possible, after all. And on top of that, thank you for enjoying my singing. I know it's absolutely horrendous, but that's kind of what's funny about it. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And thank you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is OG Wakanobi. And thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep running. And OG Wakanobi said, LSA strong and Slava Ukraini. And LSA strong and Slava Ukraini. And thank you so much once again for supporting this channel and helping it to keep on running. Because folks like you make it possible. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And also, really quickly, Stephanie Rose asked a question, said, so did Matt have to get a job somewhere else? Right now, Matthew does not have a job. He's focusing entirely on law school. I think he's planning on getting a job in the summer, something along those lines. But right now he doesn't. And also that was another concern that had been coming up for months on end, because while I wasn't, like, you know, while the support was very low, well, you know, I don't want to say it was very low, it was just lower than normal. You know, after, you know, you take out YouTube's 30%, and then you also consider that, you know, regardless of how both of us get paid, YouTube, well, the US government is going to be taking an additional 50% of the 70% we got, so we end up with like 35% of the actual support, you know, that was given at the end of the year. We only really keep about 35 to 40% of that in the end. Then you know, that gets paid out to both Matthew and me, and the support was getting low enough that he was starting to say, man, this is going to be really rough. I mean, you know, especially the hours we work, sometimes with the amount of hours we work and the amount of support we get, we actually end up making less than minimum wage for the amount of time we put into this thing, because rarely do I ever put this into like hourly computations, but in some of the very lowest times of support that the channel's received, I would sit there and go, you know, how much and are we making per hour? And I think at one point I was making like $6.50 an hour after Matthew got paid and after everything else happened on the channel. You know, everything else had to get paid and everyone took their cut and all that crap. I would be making like $6.50 an hour, which is like 75 cents below minimum wage here in Alabama. But beyond that, what's important about that is that Matthew was also suffering something very similar. And so he was saying, man, this is, you know, pretty tough. I mean, you know, for the amount of hours and stress I'm working, this is a really tough thing to, you know, do. And that was also a big stressor as well, is that as the support continued to drop, we started to go and talk about, you know, how much longer is the channel going to be possible? Because with the amount of time we're working and the amount of stress, you know, that could end up, you know, being a death knell on the channel as well. And so that was another thing. I mean, you know, that was another huge concern, not going to, you know, kid around or beat around the bush on that. That was another big concern and a very big stressor that we were both dealing with in background as well, that we always tried to keep down on air, because we don't want people to be, you know, feeling like you'll have to support. Because y'all shouldn't feel like y'all have to support. This thing is entirely free, and the support y'all give is incredible anyway. I mean, whether it was $10 of support that we got throughout the entirety of the night, y'all don't owe us a cent. So, you know, that's kind of how we looked at it behind the air. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next super chat, which is the largest one of the night. It is unbelievable. And it is a 100 euro super chat from Wilness LSA SA. And Wilness said, best channel on YouTube. News community, history, I'm always here. For tempted enforcers, do some rest. I'm joining to the rest fund. Greetings from Latvia, city of Cesis. LSA forever at January 1991, OMON tried to take over the Latvian government. And really cool to know that you are from Latvia. And let me try and find your city real quick on the map. So there's Ogre. I know Ogre. But where is your city? Is it a smaller one? Will I have to zoom in further? I don't know. Let's see. Now let's go here. Here we go. We found it. And look at that. It's got a nice little train station. It's got a football field, European football, of course. Let's go check out the town square. What does it look like? Oh, lucky! Oh, y'all always live in nice little towns in Europe. It always makes me so jealous because no American town looks as nice as European ones or as quaint. I mean, this is nice. This is nice. I gotta say, thank you so much once again for the support and helping the channel to keep running. And thank you so much for the kind words as well. It means so much to me that people do find the channel to be worthwhile and enjoy it a great deal. That is one of the big determinants as to why, no matter what, I've always been dedicated to running this channel 6 days a week, because the overflowing of appreciation and kindness that y'all give is always incredible. And I got to thank you so much for that, Wilderness. And also, thank you so much for putting in some support to the Rest Fund. Hopefully I will be able to get rest, and that'll be when I die. But nevertheless, thank you so much once again for the massive amount of support. And also, I will have to look a little bit more into Latvian history, because I know a great deal about a couple of Soviet republics' history. Ukraine is one, Poland is another, and East Germany is one. And then, of course, the Russian Soviet Republic. That's another one. The Russian Federative Soviet Republic. This is the RFSR. That's another one I know a great deal about. But sadly, the Baltic states and Belarus are Soviet republics I don't really know that much about. But I hope that does address that pretty well. I'm going to look into that after stream and read up a little bit on that history. But still, thank you so much for being one of our Latvian viewers, Wilderness, and thank you so much for the massive support and helping this channel to keep on running. Just like I was saying a moment ago, it is y'all's continued support to this channel that makes this thing possible. I absolutely hate talking about the channel's support situation, but it means a lot to me that folks like you do find this thing to be worthwhile and worth supporting. I gotta thank you so much once again, and I gotta be quite honest with y'all, I absolutely hate talking about the support side of things about this channel, because it feels like begging, and I'm not really one to want to beg for support. If people, and no dated again, apparently the stream just flatlined for a second, so sorry everyone, but we'll be waiting for that to come back, and hopefully it's coming back. YouTube says, there we go, it's back. But one thing that I just hate is talking about how the channel needs support. Absolutely hate it. I would honestly rather not, and I think from this point forward, I'm probably never going to bring up the support side of things on this channel again, because I don't like to. I don't like to make it feel like, you know, y'all have to support the channel or the channel's about to die. If people support the channel, that's great. If people don't support the channel, then, you know, then I'll have to figure out what to do from there. But I still want to thank you so much for the massive amount of support and helping this channel to keep on running, Wilderness, because people like you do make this thing possible. And so thank you so much once again. And so with that, we are on to the next one, which is a $50 super chat from Trister1. And he said, sorry to have missed so much. Hope Matt is doing well. You too, Andrew. And thank you so much for that. And thank you for helping the channel to keep on running. And hey, it's perfectly fine. People are busy out there in the world. BC Skyman, some people are asking, where is BC Skyman? Because he's always here with us. He is probably on another hunting trip, or he's on a vacation with his family. That's usually where BC Skyman goes when he's not here on this channel. Or that one time, he actually went to Ukraine and helped out over there. But he could be doing anything. Whatever he's doing, I bet it's great. Because BC Skyman is an amazing viewer. But beyond that, a lot has been going on, and it's perfectly okay, Tristan. Much like folks like BC Skyman, every once in a while, folks have to go and do their own things. Everyone has their own life, and I completely understand that, Tristan. And that is totally fine that you missed a lot. Now is a perfect time to catch up, and a lot of viewers may be able to help you out with that. If thing is, you know, new here and there, like Enforcer Matt no longer being here or something like that. But nevertheless, thank you so much once again for the incredible support, Trister. And Matt is doing amazingly well, and I'm doing very good too. And I'm just trucking along and making sure to do my thing. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. Thank you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one. UH said 50% tax. Thought USA had a little less. Technically, we do. I mean, like the tax brackets, I think they get up as high now as like 34%. But the thing is that nobody tells you this unless if you're self-employed. There's an additional 15% just flat tax added on if you're self-employed. So every YouTuber, if they're filing their taxes correctly, would have to add on that additional 15%. So if you make it into that like 34% tax bracket, then you have to go and tack on an additional 15%. Yeah, hell, even at lower tax brackets, because I don't even think we made it up to 34 last year, but we made it up to something. You have to tack on that 15% additional tax, income, and so you end up giving 50%. And that's something that is very interesting as far as people always talking about, folks need to like pay more taxes because when you add in the self-employment tax, it's insane. I mean, like, it is crazy the amount that has to be paid out in taxes. I'm like, geez, that is a load. But with that, I hope that does, address that well. And also another thing that they don't tell you outside the United States, or really in the United States for that matter, is that you have to pay federal and state taxes. It's not just like, money to the federal government. So, the federal government may take 30% plus 15%, so that's like 45%. And then your state government may take another 10% on top of that. So you actually end up giving out a lot in taxes. It's just that nobody ever really talks about that much. And honestly, there's not really a lot of ways to get around that either. Like, you can talk to an accountant and everything, but I would be shocked if there was a way to lower the tax burden on my end, because last year it was close to like 50-something%. And I was like, God, that is a lot. Like, half of everything you make in the year is just taken away in April. And so you have to factor that in because, YouTube doesn't deduct and then pay us, like an employer would. They just give you everything, and then you've got to make sure to, factor in that at the end of the tax year, 50% of that will probably be gone. Luckily, Susie Q, I don't have to worry about property tax because I rent. I'm living in the basement of my parents' house, and I just rent from them. So thank God I don't have to worry about that tax. Otherwise, taxes would be absurd. But with that, I hope that does address that well. I hope that does give an insight to European viewers about how much you may actually pay in taxes here in America, because a lot of people always go, oh, no one pays taxes in America, but the Europeans have VAT tax, and they pay like 50% or 60% of their stuff in taxes. It's like that in America if you're self-employed. But with that, and also Stephanie Rose, we didn't actually have an accountant or anything to do our taxes last year. We actually did that by hand, which was I think God does not live wherever tax codes are. Like, I don't think he dwells in that realm, because that was literal hell. It took us months to figure out everything to do with the taxes on that side of things. That was ridiculous, and it was a nightmare. But luckily we got through it, and we found a way, because otherwise, the IRS will come and get you. So anyways, with that, hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one, which is a $50 super chat from Richard Agur, one of our Australian viewers. And he said, quite okay for you to say channel needs financial support. Let it go and let people know. We are grateful for the channel. The thing is, this is some of the best news available on a range of things, including, of course, the Ukraine war. And thank you so much for the support and helping the channel to keep on running, because folks like you help to make this thing possible. And not only that, I see what you're saying, Richard, about it's okay to tell people that the channel needs financial support. But the thing is that I do not want to sound like a beggar, and I do not want to turn into one of those YouTube channels that is constantly begging people for money. Because then it does feel like the channel shifts from being a war news channel where people support it and it's a crowdfunded thing, to where I become like a standard streamer and I'm begging for money. I don't like that. I don't like the idea of that. And that's generally why I like to try and keep it as quiet and low-key as possible about how this channel is doing support-wise. Of course, during times like these, like tonight, at the beginning, and of course that's not the case now because I have to thank everyone so much for the support that's been sent in, but at the beginning, running the stream and looking at what YouTube is going to take out of the super chats and everything, it's like, this is going to be rough. Like, I was like, this is going to be very rough, because, it just is. But I still have to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel keep running. And I got to thank you so much for being grateful for the channel, Richard. I love to know that people do appreciate it and love to see it around and want to see it keep running, because I'd love to as well. And thank you so much once again for the support and helping this thing to keep rolling, because folks like you make it possible. And so thank you so much once again, and I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And I got to make sure that I keep them all in the right order. We have a $10 super chat from Teslins, and he said, Tax Fund, LOL. And thank you so much once again for the support, and thank you for supporting the Tax Fund. You are helping me to increase and decrease the tax burden at the exact same time, and I greatly appreciate that, and thank you for helping me to keep this thing running. And so with that, thank you once again. And with that, we are on to the next one. And let's see here. The next one will go to Hoagie 1080, who threw in a 5. And he said, get yourself an insert witty product here, y'all. And thank you so much for the support, Hoagie. And thank you for helping me to get an insert something product. Probably ammo, because, you know, that's the only hobby I have. That's the only hobby I have time to have, is trying to shoot some of my rifles. And so thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because folks like you do make this thing possible. And thank you once again for supporting this channel and helping it to keep running. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is from OG Wakanobi. And he said, LSA strong and Slava Ukraini. And thank you so much for the support, OG Wakanobi. And LSA strong, the LSA never dies, and Slava Ukraini. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is a 5. From Carl. And Carl said, late to the stream, sending good vibes from Mournhold, City of Light, City of Magic. And where is that? That sounds like a cool place. Let's see, Mournhold. That place doesn't exist according to Google, but I'll believe you. I believe it exists. And thanks for all the work you put into this, matey. And thank you so much, Carol, for the support and helping this channel to keep on running and helping the Lee Spring Army to stay alive. The Enforcer protects, and thank you for that. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And K-Rock said, you're very lucky to live with your mommy. Actually, I live with my daddy, because my daddy owns the house. But yeah, you know, it would kind of be tough, you know, because you know, not to get political or anything, but a house in America costs about a minimum of $600,000 right now. So unless if I was literally raking in millions running this channel, I wouldn't be able to afford a house at this point. So really, it's either rent in this house in the basement, or rent for thousands of dollars for a okay apartment out there in an apartment complex, and then not be able to run the stream because people would get annoyed with the noise coming from the apartment, or, you know, I live under a bridge. So one or the other. I'm pretty lucky. You know, I will agree. I'm pretty lucky. But anyways, moving on from that and into the next one, we had a $5 super chat from Teslins, and he said cookie time. And cookie time indeed. I love a cookie. Honestly, my favorite cookies are sugar cookies. I just like them because they're simple. But don't get me wrong, I love some spice, but sugar cookies are the best cookies. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, and thank you once again for helping this channel keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is a $2 super chat from Wyatt Logan. And he said, you the man. And thank you so much for the support, because you the man, Wyatt Logan. You're an old guard who's been around forever, and I gotta thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is a $5 super chat from Hoodoo, Texas. And Hoodoo, Texas said, Enforcer, you might want to update Nightbot. It still tells folks to contact Enforcer Matt with questions. And you got a good point. I have not updated that, and I need to update that. So thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is a $2 super chat from Joshua Smith. And he said, the Blaze TV vid about Doctors Without Borders, true? I haven't seen that video, to be entirely honest with you, so I wouldn't be able to tell you if it was or wasn't. I'll tell you why we don't run fundraisers for Doctors Without Borders here on this channel anymore, is because while they do incredible work in Ukraine and have been able to save hundreds of thousands of lives there, they ended up condemning Israel in the Israel-Palestine more so the Israel-Hamas conflict, way back at the very beginning, way back on October 7th. Literally at the onset, they went, oh, those Israelis with 2,500 innocent civilians killed, they're sick. And I was like, what? And so that's why we stopped running fundraisers for them. And also on top of that, I will not lie, it also made us very annoyed that we had ended up fundraising hundreds of thousands of dollars through the Lee Spring Army for them, through those fundraisers, and we tried to reach out to them, and they never even acknowledged this channel or what it had done, which it doesn't make me angry when people don't recognize me personally for doing things, but when we reach out on behalf of the entire Lee Spring Army and we're like, they did something incredible, and then no one wants to credit y'all with what y'all have done, that gets me pissed off. And I was like, you know what? If you're too high and mighty to recognize a community of people who have raised unbelievable amounts of support for your nonprofit, then, you know, I'm perfectly fine with, also for the other aforementioned reason, to not run a fundraiser again for that nonprofit. That's my honest opinion. That's why we really only run nonprofits now for Revive Soldiers of Ukraine and Razlom for Ukraine, because they're both organizations that are in Ukraine. They also have U.S. offices. That's how we can fundraise for them on YouTube Give, because they have to be a registered 501(c) nonprofit here in the United States, and also be in the Guide Star program. But that's the reason why we never ran one for them again. I don't know about that video, though. I can't confirm whether whatever they said was true or not. And also, I don't want to get into the area of saying things that may be blatantly untrue about them that could be defamatory. Because, you know, I'm not trying to bury them in the dirt. I'm just saying why I disagree with them to the point we won't fundraise for them again. You know, because the fact that y'all, because I think in the end, the amount of funds that was raised for Doctors Without Borders is like $500 and something thousand, $600 something thousand that the Lee Spring Army raised as a cumulative thing. I think we fundraised for them more than really any other nonprofit we ever have done. And the fact that they could never recognize the channel for that, really the community, the Lee Spring Army for that, really annoyed us. So that was another big reason why. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that quite well indeed. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is an unbelievable $100 super chat from Truster1 with no comment. And I gotta thank you for the unbelievable support, Truster. You didn't even throw in a comment. And I gotta thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because folks like you make this thing possible. And thank you so much once again, Truster, because if it wasn't for folks like you, I wouldn't be able to be on air. Thank you so much, and long live the Lee Spring Army. And so with that, we are on to the next one, which is a $20 super chat from Richard Agur. And Richard said, let's see. Okay. But anyways, Richard said, another donation for a good answer. And thank you so much, Richard, for another super chat for a good answer. And I'm glad that you found that answer worthwhile. And thank you once again for supporting this channel and helping this thing to be possible and keep on running. Because folks like you, Richard, make this channel possible. And I cannot say that enough to everyone. Y'all make the channel possible through your support. The channel would not be able to survive without support. And I thank y'all so much for that once again. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And also, once again, before we move on, I have to give another massive shout out to Truster1, who has thrown in massive support for the channel tonight and helped to keep this thing running. And also Wilderness LSA. Both of them have thrown in incredible support. And I got to thank you all both once again for helping this channel to keep on running, making this thing possible. Because if it wasn't for folks like y'all, and really everyone who supported the channel tonight, but especially both of y'all, I would not be able to make this thing possible. And so thank you all so much once again. And I hope that does address that the best I can. Moving on from that and into our next super chat. This one is a $5 super chat. The first super chat ever from Nicholas A, according to YouTube. And he said, longtime viewer, first time donator, your effort is unmatched by others like you. And thank you so much for saying that. I try my best to hopefully outshine other YouTubers through the amount of work we put into this. That's why we have our custom map. And we try and, you know, keep this thing rolling as best as we can. And I gotta thank you for enjoying it. It means a lot to me. And I gotta just say, it is absolutely incredible that folks like you find this channel worthwhile enough to support and help me to keep this thing going and to help keep this kind of a work ethic alive. And so thank you once again. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is a $5 super chat from Scott Kemp. The third super chat he's ever given to this channel in history. And he said, Enforcer, of course you'll make enough money here and get through law school. How else will you become president? And thank you so much for the support. How else will I become president? That is a great question. And a question that we will have to answer over time. I'm hoping to eventually become the president of the country. Last night, I actually talked a little bit about a situation going on here in the States, and I thought I took a middle ground stance, but apparently some people got ruffled because I didn't agree with them. But nevertheless, hopefully I will be able to become president, because it seemed like while some people got ruffled, many people agree with my sentiment about what this nation should be and what we should be looking forward towards. But still, thank you so much once again for support, Scott Kemp, and helping this channel to keep rolling. And it looks like we have a bot. We have a bot alert. Oh, look at that. So, hang on, let me go see what else this guy said. This was interesting. Didn't really say a lot. He only said like one thing. The guy said, and that is why I stopped supporting this channel, an apologist for the Israeli atrocities. And that is why you got banned. Because there is no greater atrocity than what your mother's done to the streets. But with that, I hope that does address that well. And thank you so much, Heather Fitzgibbon, for pointing out that bot and helping me to be able to crush them rightly. And so with that, we are on to the next one, which is a $5 super chat from Ed. Hey, Irish Ed. And Irish Ed here. Sorry, only $5. My wife and daughters are vampires. Thank you, Andrew. Also, FYI, I watch YouTube on my Fire Stick, 75-inch. No chat. And thank you so much for the support. And Irish Ed be flexing up in here with the 75-inch TV. I mean, that thing is a wall. that thing is not a TV. That thing is literally called the digital wall. Still, thank you so much for the support and helping the channel to keep on running, Ed, because any support is great support. And I gotta thank you for the $5 super chat. Any amount is worthwhile, because I know how much it takes to earn $1, because I've worked at actual real jobs, which is something that if I become president, many other politicians have not done. Really, no one that gets in a political position has ever worked a real job, except for a few. But beyond that, I gotta thank you so much for the support, Irish Ed, and helping this channel to keep running, because folks like you help to make it possible. And so with that, we are on to the next one, which is a 5 from Butchie777, and he said, keep it up! Yeah, we'll keep it up. And thank you so much for the support, Butchie777. And of course, helping this channel to keep running, because folks like you, like always, make this channel possible. And so thank you so much once again. And I hope I was able to address that quite well indeed. But we have to, of course, move on into the fun times. Y'all start throwing in live chats, y'all, because I'm going to be answering live chats. I'm going to be scrolling through and trying to answer some of them that came through previously. So let's see what we got. And so, let's see here. Moving on into our first live chat, Siri said, remember, you're not a sellout if you never bought in. And I guess that's true. I guess I'm not a sellout. I would hope I'm not, because through crowdfunding, I never have to sell out to a sponsor or YouTube. So thank you so much for that. And thank you for saying that, because I guess I am not a sellout. But Hoodoo Texas said, oh, Hoodoo Texas just addressed something for the live chat journal. Thank you for that, Hoodoo. And Miss Disa said, you are paying into your Social Security account that you can tap when you turn 70. And that's true. That's what the self-employment tax is. But, you know, it's like, what if I want to forgo that? Because, you know, law school is here in the now. But, you know, I guess the IRS doesn't care. They just want me to put stuff into Social Security. But still, that is a good point, Miss Disa, and I guess that does justify it. And John Smith said, couldn't you make an LLC? I would have to go back and look at the legal paperwork, because I think technically the Enforcer is an LLC, or it is I think it is an LLC, actually. Enforcer Media is an LLC, so I'll have to go back and look at that, but I believe it is in fact an LLC, but for some reason I can't remember off the top of my head. But moving on from that and into our next live chat, let's see. Dante said, you could do a scheduled fundraiser to keep your lights on, like how public FM radio stations do, listener-supported Enforcer Radio. And I could do that, but I don't want to, because, like, I want that kind of spirit and specialness to be held for fundraisers for Ukraine only. It really shakes me to my core to think that one day, I may actually have to do stuff like that, because, you know, and it's not a bad idea, by the way, Dante, at all. I don't want to sound like I'm like cutting your idea down to be like 2 feet tall, but it seems to me like it would be begging for money. That's how I would look at it in my head, and that's why I wouldn't really want to do stuff like that, because to me it just seems like it wouldn't come off well. But that's me personally. You know, a lot of people are always like, no, do it, but at the same time, I respect y'all, and I don't want, you know, y'all to come on air one night, and then it's just me, like, trying to drum up money for myself. You know, and that's, like, the entire premise of the channel. It's like, you know, no news, just, you know, give me money. I hate that. Like, thinking about that, I'm like, I would feel like a real ass if I did something like that. But it's not a bad idea. It's just that, you know, because of my own personal convictions, I probably would not do that. But still, thank you for the support and a good idea, Dante. And Tom Exman said, hope you get to do reenactments, the Enforcer. I wish. I probably will never get to do a reenactment here in the future. It probably will be another year away at this point, because there's just not enough time. Like, like I was talking about a little bit earlier, Tom, and you were here, and I remember you were engaged in the conversation. I'm working about 20 hours a day at this point, most days, and like the weekends, like right now, I have maybe about 4 hours of free time each day because I'm also trying to catch up on sleep that I'm not getting through the week. So I have about 4 hours of free time on those days to try and get stuff done. And today, one of the things I was trying to get done was let's see, try and figure out where in the world I'm going to take the car because, you know, the car's still messed up. And also try and figure out some other things with cleaning one of the guns, because one of the guns, specifically the AK, fires corrosive ammo. And I'm always trying to make sure to get that thing extra clean because corrosive ammo can do nasty work to an AK. So that was another thing I was trying to get taken care of today, but I wasn't able to because of certain reasons. But with that, I hope that does address that well. And let's see. And UNRWA just fired 10 people because they participated in the massacre on October 7th. And thank you for sharing that, Dante. And I'm glad to know that at least some of these people are being held accountable. Because, you know, it's ridiculous to me. I'll just be quite honest with y'all. It's ridiculous to me that Hamas crossed that border on October 7th, ended up killing about 2,500 citizens that were unarmed, and ended up taking hundreds hostage. And then the response from some, like, I'm not going to lie, you have to be an idiot to support hostage holding, civilian killing terrorists. You know, regardless of whatever happened, I don't think terrorism is the answer. And then to sit there and go, oh, you're an apologist to Israel because you're not willing to support terrorists. It's like, what are you, an idiot? Like, it's like, obviously not. It's like, what? So it's like, I'm wanting to become the president of the United States in the future. And so to sit there and have that kind of a mindset, I'm now going to legitimize, in my own words, terroristic and low-down actions that if it happened in the Ukraine war and the Russians were doing it, I would call them sick bastards for doing something like that, and we do. And then with Israel and Palestine, I'm supposed to call Hamas a good group of people, although they're doing something that is straight up evil and terroristic. That's something that I just can't get in line with. Like, and I'm glad that people are getting fired and held accountable for being a part of that massacre and that atrocity. Now, you know, what happened afterwards, which, you know, many people have been talking about because apparently the amount of civilian deaths in the Gaza Strip has been incredibly high, at least from reported numbers. Now that's a whole other story and something to be denounced in its own right as well, but that is, you know, those are almost two completely different scenarios. You know, of course you can condemn the Israeli, well, at least you can condemn the Israelis a little bit for supposedly killing 25,000 civilians in the Gaza Strip. Whether that number is true or not, we don't really know because it's being reported by Palestinian authorities and Hamas. So, you know, they have a reason to hyperinflate the number, so you don't really know if it's true or not. But at the same time, it's something else to sit there and say, yes, but the standalone massacre or ethnic cleansing pretty much that Hamas tried to pull off on the 7th of October is justified. No, it's not. Really, the deaths of civilians wherever they may be for whatever reason is not justified. If it's in an incredibly small number and it was a great necessity for a nation, it can be excused a little bit, but, you know, deaths of civilians, not something I get behind. But nevertheless, hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one. Thank you, everyone, for notifying me of the bot. And let's see here. And Terry Richardson said, reenacting season starts for me soon. And best of luck. I hope you have a lot of fun out there. I wish I could be out there, too. And let's see. And let's see here. 1,200 citizens. That's true. And, like, let's see here. Can have a plum, be far more aggressive than any panhandler in LA. Well, you know, if I'm more aggressive than a panhandler in LA, they've got to be passive or something. But let's see. Sorry, no war is allowed to. And I would agree, Yorn. I agree with that completely. I think that's unacceptable, especially in a modern civilized age like the one we're in. Acts of barbarism should not be supported by any means. That's my honest opinion. And now I will say this. Of course, you end up having to pick a side in geopolitical situations, and regardless of what the Israelis have now done in response to that, I still end up supporting the Israelis because, you know, what am I going to do? Support Hamas, which is a terrorist group supported by a country like Iran who wishes that the United States would fall every day and wishes for everyone in this nation to die? It's like, you know, who am I supposed to choose in that? Obviously, I'll pick the Israelis because it's clearly a better option. You know, and in the future, someone will bring that up when I'm running for president and go, he supported the Israelis carpet bombing those poor innocent Palestinians because he said, why would I support Iran? You know, and someone's going to make it try and sound bad. But the honest truth is, we're playing a geopolitical game. And, you know, while there's millions, hundreds of millions of lives involved, when we get involved in the Middle East, you never end up supporting groups like Hamas, Hezbollah, or the Houthis, because you know what happens is rocket attacks on your boats, and then you have a whole issue with that. So hope that does address that well. And let's see here. Moving on to the next one. And let's see here. Check out, let's see, Gate 10 Vilnius, follow the street. I spent a few years living in Lithuania. These houses are protected, as many accidentally burn for a development project. And Butchie, that is something that I hate. And that's something that's actually happened in the UK a little bit, is that like a development firm will come in and they'll be like, oh, you know, we want to build a skyscraper here. And then they'll go, nope, sorry, those are grade 1 listed buildings. You can't do that. And then all of a sudden, those buildings magically catch on fire and burn to the ground. And then the skyscraper gets built. I think that's happened in a few, like 1 or 2 instances in the UK. And there was actually a company that did it. And they actually got found out for it. And they got fined bukus. Like, it was a crazy amount they got fined for what happened there. And I'm glad that they were held accountable. But let's see here. Let me type that in. Oh, wait, why am I typing that in the live chat? I need to be typing that up here. So, let's see. And let's see. Here we go. This is the general location. So, let's put that in again. Let me type in 10 Vilnius. And this ought to be it. Okay, so here we go. Let's drop down on the street. Let's check it out. Oh, cool. Oh, I love these houses. Like, by the way, these are cool. These are like traditional houses from, what, the 18th century, I believe? Very cool stuff. Absolutely love things like this. And I gotta tell you, I have an affinity for old buildings, really because of how classic they are and how much culture they embody. I mean, this one is in bad straits. Really, this one's in bad straits too. Really, a lot of them are in pretty bad straits, but still, they're timber. So, you know, obviously they'll get in pretty bad shape and they'll end up being like a ship of thesis thing because you're going to have to replace the timbers at some point. But beyond that, I gotta say, really cool Butchie 777. I love to see these kinds of houses, and I think this is super neat. Really cool to know that you lived in Lithuania, and hopefully these things will never burn down, because they do have a lot of character and probably have a lot of history, especially considering that these things somehow survived World War I and World War II. Very impressive feat. But with that, thank you so much once again for for an interesting little look around the town and helping this channel to have something to talk about. And Carl said, what USA equipment are you most proud to see in Ukraine? Honestly, the M1A1 Abrams is the one I'm most proud of, although we haven't seen it in action a lot. Just because it's like the peak of what people think of when they think of American military tech is an Abrams or an F-22 Raptor. And let's see, and Teslins threw in a $10 super chat. And he said, can you discuss the history of the Crimean War, please? Good point. So, everything that you ever talk about, all the way up to World War I, every single thing goes back to the Congress of Vienna in 1815. The Congress of Vienna in 1815 was a treaty that was made by all of the major powers in Europe, including the British Empire, the French Empire, Prussia, Turkey, and the Russian Empire. And also, I believe, Italy, or at least one of the states that was in Italy at that time, to make sure that the balance of power was ensured in Europe for the rest of all time. To make sure that, because the scales would be so even in each other's favor, there wouldn't be any massive wars again on the continent of Europe. And everyone would make sure to adhere to the Treaty of, the Congress of Vienna, and make sure to enforce it so that way no one would become more powerful than they should be. Fast forward from 1815 to 1853. The Russian Empire and the Ottoman Empire had been at war for, I think, a year or two at that point, where they were fighting over Romania for the most part, and also through the Caucasus Mountain region, which is where many atrocities happened on both sides. But beyond that, both sides were fighting heavily. And it was because, at the time, the Russian Empire had this concept that they were the leaders of the faith, the defenders of the faith. And guess where the Eastern Orthodox faith comes from? Constantinople, which is Istanbul now. So to try and make sure that they were defenders of the faith, the Russian Empire wanted to reclaim Constantinople and return the faith to its former glory. Also, another thing that really was like the official start of the war is that the Ottomans were putting down these Christian religious folks. These people are called Armenians, and this is something that they did a lot. And the Russians said, your treatment of these people is abhorrent, we're going to war. And so they went to war, and the Russians started to beat the Turks' ass, pretty much. They were beating them pretty well, especially in the area in modern-day Georgia, and also in the northern part of Anatolia. And also they were starting to push them back through Romania. And so this was starting to really concern the British and the French, because once again, whoever won this war at this point is really going to be tipping the balance of powers, in the Ottomans or the Russians' favor, really the Russians' favor at this point, in the violation of the Congress of Vienna of 1815. And so what the Russians and the French, or what the British and the French did, is that they ended up joining the war on the side of the Ottoman Empire, so that way they could defeat the Russians and maintain the balance of power. So the French and the British, and this is the first time, by the way, not to get ahead of myself, the first time ever that there was a Anglo-French alliance militarily in any time in history, but, well, outside the Crusades, because that would count. But anyways, they sail up a massive armada, pretty much, to the outskirts of Crimea. They drop off, I think they dropped off the British and French landing force where modern-day Avdiivka would be. And then they kind of hung out here during the winter because the logistics were terrible, and the British and French commanders during the Crimean Wars were very incompetent. But the Russian commanders were even more incompetent, which is why they would end up winning. But anyways, when the spring arrived, I think they ended up attacking Sevastopol, ended up taking it. And I think by the later part of that year, the war was pretty much over, and the balance of power was restored, and everything returned back to normal. I think that's the best explanation I could give without having to read like some books to make sure that I'm getting the historical synopsis correct, but that should be the story. But with that, I hope that does address that, hopefully the best I can, and thank you so much, Teslin, for the support and wanting to see this channel keep on running, and I hope you enjoyed that little rabbit hole. And so, let's see here. Let me move on into our next live chats, and I think I'll only be answering the ones left in the chat at this moment, and then I'll be moving into the final question of the night. And so, Susie Q said, did you know in Vietnam they followed World War II, the Korean War, and in Vietnam is cigarette butts, which is kind of weird because we smoked a lot back then, and now nobody in America smokes anymore. It's actually really funny. But let's see. And also, I don't smoke, just in case y'all are wondering. And let's see. What's that? Let me go through and look at this. I need some context. Who said that? Why would you say that, pal? What are you doing, huh? Let's see here. Let me go through the chat. I can't see you say anything else. I'm just going to take that for what it is. But anyways, we are on to the lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night, which is Indy Andy 4C. And he said, growing calls for that bloody marmot. And y'all know what time it is. It is time for the marmot. Oh, goodness. Oh, hello there. Would you like a plum? It's marmot time, baby. We love the marmot. It's a stupid little critter, and it's a cute little critter. But y'all know what time it is. It is time for this channel to round out. Oh, wait a minute. Hang on. Hold up. Let me get rid of two of them, actually. Thank y'all for pointing that out. But it is time for a succulent plum. And it's time for us to round out this channel as well. And so, of course, I hope y'all enjoyed this small amount of marmot time at the end of the channel. And I will see you all tomorrow for the Sunday fundraiser. Of course, good night, good luck, stay safe, take care, Slava Ukraine, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die. And of course, thank you all once again for watching. And also, Governor Ivy, wait a minute, hang on, before I move on, Governor Ivy. Oh, wait a minute. Hold up. I'm so sorry, y'all. Thank you for pointing that out. Because I also missed JD Macko's super chat. I don't know how. How in the hell did I do this? But anyways, Thank you for pointing that out, Governor Ivy. I did not mean to skip over that. Governor, the Super Chat segment is not over, by the way, y'all. There's actually a little bit more left. Governor Ivy threw in a 5 and said, repeat after me. Mecca Leka Hi, Mecca Heini Ho, Mecca Leka Hi, Mecca Lani Ho, Mecca Leka Leaky Below. May God bless the LSA. And we love you, Andrew. And hey, thank you so much for the support, Governor Ivy. And I love you too. I love the entirety of the LSA from top to bottom. And thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And moving on from that, we got a $20 super chat from JD Mako 23. And JD Mako said the Marmot gets angry when he receives no attention. And damn right, and he's here right now. But still, thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And Teslans, I did address your super chat. And so I thank you for the support and helping the channel to keep on running. And then our final super chat of the night is a 5 from Juan Pablo 0043, and he said, thanks for your good work, and thank you, Juan Pablo, for supporting my good work and helping it to be possible. And with that, it really is the end of the night stream. But I got to thank everyone once again who supported the channel. I'm so sorry that I almost missed a couple of y'all, and thank you so much, Governor Ivy, for bringing attention to that, because for some reason those last few super chats completely almost, like, slipped my mind, and that would have been so rude of me. But nevertheless, thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. Folks like y'all do make it possible. And of course, good night, good luck, stay safe, take care, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die. Put an LSA in the chat, and good night.
Yes. The Lee Spring Army sends its regards.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.